There are memories that remain vividly clear even after more than 10 years. That was when Demian was only 25. The first time he set foot on the battlefield, the first moment he had to take a life. The moment blood fell in dark red droplets onto the tiled floor. And then the time he wiped out over 2,000 enemy soldiers. And then his breath gradually grew weak. Finally his body collapsed, and after that, the screen shifted to a morning scene at City Hall. A pale-faced, red-haired boy stared at a contract. Opposite him sat a middle-aged man and another man who kept babbling. The gist was that all of his parents' insurance money after their deaths would be managed by this uncle. If you've checked the papers carefully, please sign here. Pucker pretended to be kind as he urged his nephew, yes, Demian. The papers are just for show anyway, just put your signature and everything will be settled. He smugly propped his chin and coaxed him, rest assured and leave it all to me. When you come of age, I'll return every penny. Demian's fingers tightened on the paper. He suddenly realized that Day had completely upended his life. Demian decisively tore the contract apart and coldly declared that he would accept the insurance only via the Imperial Bank, and it must be solely in his name. Pucker stared in shock as the papers fluttered about. What is this? Demian added indifferently and add a special clause. Without my evidence, signature, or documents, no one else is permitted to withdraw the funds. His gaze was resolute and unwavering, allowing no room for refusal. Pucker was so furious his hands trembled. He flew into a rage, grabbed Demian by the collar and shouted, "What are you doing, you brat? Just sign the paper and stop making trouble." Expecting him to repent, instead Demian curled his lip and remarked that he had worried the man would pretend to be kind and let it slide. Before Pucker could finish his scolding, wondering what trick this was, a punch was swung that sent him flying and tumbling across the floor. Demian smiled in satisfaction and thanked him for still keeping the same nasty face as in my memory. As he turned to Dalek, the man shrank back in panic. Dalek frantically rummaged through his briefcase for supplementary clauses that could be added immediately. The current situation made Demian unconsciously fall into thought. If it had been before, when he was only 13, he couldn't have done anything, but... He grinned with glee. Now it's fine because he had been reborn back into the past. Back to the time in his previous life when Demian alone had to drag his exhausted body across battlefields strewn with corpses. He panted wearily and cursed under his breath, "Damn it. I told you from the start this was a mad campaign." Demian then was captain of the Baroque Kingdom's punishment squad, gritting his teeth in fury. With only 100 men, how could they possibly defeat a force of over 2,000? Suddenly he opened his mouth and spat blood. His vision also began to blur. Demian weakly reached toward a fallen soldier. He closed the man's eyes to let him go peacefully. Remorse flooded his mind, even though the campaign ultimately succeeded. Demian collapsed to his knees beside his comrades' bodies in despair, muttering, "I'm sorry. If only I had been a little stronger then, I would have protected everyone." He slammed his fist hard onto the ground in frustration. "Damn it." Demian staggered, clutching his side. His body seemed unable to hold out much longer. His form swayed in the air. He thought to himself that he was probably about to die. A dirty steel helmet was thrown into a corner. Demian lay helplessly, resigned to fate. He raised a hand to cover his eyes, ready to spill with emotion. Maybe it was because he was about to die that all these thoughts came to him. If only I'd joined the army earlier instead of waiting until 25, things might have been different. A hot tear ran down his cheek. Demian bit his lip just once more. If only heaven would give me another chance. I swear I'll lead these brothers to dominate the battlefield, but now it's too late. In his memory of the previous life, Demian had breathed his last. He had thought he died then. But luckily a miracle occurred. Unexpectedly Demian returned to the past. And it was 17 years earlier. He looked at his two smooth hands that had never faced life and death. Then he lifted his shirt to inspect his small belly. The mana core located in the lower abdomen is the most important thing for martial commanders who cultivate magic. Unlike in his previous life, Demian's current mana core was still intact. In this life he could learn to master mana on his own. Yet Demian remained uneasy. In his last life, after his uncle tricked away all the insurance funds and kicked him out, he had to live in hiding and do all sorts of odd jobs in the underworld. An orphan abandoned by his guardian like him ended up going to prison for the crimes of a gang official. He thought his life was over when forced into the army and sent to the front lines. Yet someone like him still reached this day. Demian stupidly let himself sink onto the soft bed. Who would have thought he'd ever become a team captain? He concluded with boredom, but in the end I'm still dead. While Demian was still lost in tangled thoughts, soft footsteps sounded outside. After all, the time in the military was still. He carefully sprang up from the bed, an uninvited guest. Demian warily reached for the knife under his pillow. The other person slowly pushed the handle. The moment the door crack opened, Demian lunged out like a wild animal with a knife. The assassins all jolted in shock. What the hell? He drove the blade hard into the nearest man's thigh. When the man screamed in pain, Demian immediately pulled the knife out. Damn, it only went in halfway. The remaining assassin reacted fast and howled like a madman as he charged. You bastard, I'll kill you. Demian nimbly dodged the first thrust. The crazed assassin tried to stab again. Demian ducked his head and successfully avoided it. Then he delivered a knife strike straight into the meat of the man's leg. A flash of bloodlust and sharpness lit Demian's eyes. Who sent you here? The two strangers lay sprawled on the ground, writhing and crying pitifully. Each had been stabbed once in the thigh. Demian grabbed the collar of the remaining one, then raised his knife to interrogate whether Pucker had sent them. When he saw it wouldn't answer, he punched it straight away. I'm asking, did Pucker send you? While taking care of things, Demian suddenly heard someone from afar badmouthing him. This brat is really terrifying. Turning around, he saw someone approaching. Muckman walked up as if he owned the place and said to himself, have I introduced myself yet? He thought inwardly, Muckman showing up here means they were dealing with that strange fellow but saw a better target, so they sent him out instead. Demian sneered and began to recount. So then, 17 years ago at that time, in the narrow alley of a small street, Demian was grabbed by a group of strangers. He kept screaming and struggling. Let me go, it hurts. It's strange that they caught me even though I hid all the way in this slum. They kicked him hard, handcuffed him and took him away. Demian still held Pucker's greedy face in his mind. He realized his capture had been part of Pucker's plan all along. The more he spoke, the tighter Demian pressed the knife into the man's body. He slowly rose to his feet. Pointing the knife at Muckman, he said, you bastard, you dared betray me. Muckman's eyes returned his gaze, filled with an indescribable hatred. Without another word, the man lunged forward. Demian reacted quickly and dodged one of his strikes. His speed even shocked Muckman a bit. His calmness made the man even more unnerved. Demian thought wryly, was Muckman really the weakling he seemed to be? No matter how fast Muckman was, he couldn't so much as touch a hair on Demian's leg. He felt smug. I've got a very special ability. After missing so many times you get frustrated, Muckman shouted, you brat, while Demian thought to himself that after thousands of beatings and dying and coming back 100 times, he had begun to see through every move his opponents made. Impatience showed clearly in Muckman's eyes, at the very moment the enemy prepared to strike from his gaze. Demian read each of Muckman's gestures, the direction he planted his foot, the angle of his waist twist, waiting for the movement at his shoulder. By the time the man struck, Demian had predicted it 10 seconds earlier, so he dodged more smoothly than a dancer. It was obvious he intended to hit the head. Muckman raged but could do nothing. The more frantic he became, the easier Demian could predict him. This little rat is too blatant. Luckily, he grabbed Muckman's wrist. The sword was flung far away. Disarmed, Muckman lost the upper hand. He wanted to blow up this whole castle and be done with it, but now there's no saving him, you bastard. A slash to the flank left Muckman unable to resist. He couldn't believe it, no way. He looked every which way and it was just a kid, how could he? Annoyed, Demian pulled out his knife to make him suffer and die. Muckman could only look up and moan. He was clearly only 13. Demian put on his coolest expression ever and asked, "Wanna know how I could block you?" Demian proudly raised his knife. "It's nothing special, I just saw exactly where you intended to strike." The moment you lifted your hand, I already predicted it all. Muckman's face went ashen. After hearing that, he was so furious he felt like vomiting blood. What an absurd thing. Before he could say more, Demian pressed the knife to his face and said, "Believe it or not, it's up to you because it's the truth." With his last bit of strength, "I'll have to give you a scare." Muckman began a psychological play. "You think I'm the only one? If this gets out to the others? What if it runs into stubborn little Demian here? You're about to die. How could this rumor spread?" Instead, Demian took the chance to probe. "You're not exactly clever either. You know what you should do, right? Did Pucker send you?" Muckman, like the others, refused to utter a word. Demian said, half jokingly, half seriously, "Answer properly, unless you want to be crippled for life." He still couldn't believe his eyes. Could such looks belong to a 13-year-old? Demian's bloodshot eyes also made him recoil in fear. Finally, Muckman admitted, "Yes, it was Pucker who hired me to come here." Demian barked at him to shut up. "All right, that's enough." Muckman still didn't understand what was happening. What? Then a basic slash like a butcher's skill. His neck was like a chicken being slaughtered. Demian turned away coldly. "Right, even if I leave, I still have to clean up the aftermath properly." He thought to himself, living to 30, one lesson I've learned is to minimize making enemies. But if you unfortunately already have enemies, you lock their bodies in a room and make sure they're crushed so they never get up again. At a small house deep in the forest, Montauk checked his watch and guessed that things over there were probably finished by now. Pucker seemed to be furious at Demian. "That bastard, come here." Montauk, still proud, said, "Once it's done, I'll drag him here. Don't worry, sir." He told him to send a kid and even deploy me. "Looks like you're really angry." Pucker slammed the table, his face battered. "Because of that bastard eye." He felt a sharp pain from excitement. "Wait." He stopped talking and instead tried to reassure that he'd settle it soon. "Please wait a bit longer. Don't use my slight delay as an excuse to cut my pay." No sooner had he finished speaking than the door was shoved open. Montauk was supposed to arrive and Pucker was boiling inside. "I'd like to tear him apart now, but that damned insurance contract is the problem," he thought angrily. "Once that contract is settled, I'll deal with that brat properly." As the door opened, a throwing knife flew in. Montauk's face fell. "What's going on?" The knife stuck into the ground. Pucker was terrified at the sight. Montauk seemed to sense something was wrong. "Failed." Demian entered confidently. He asked, "You're Demian?" The boy replied amicably, "Yes, the lackey." Being called a lackey made Montauk a bit puzzled. Demian glared at him and said, "Aren't you the lackey of that fat pig standing behind? That's why you obediently follow his orders." Montauk shouted, "Pucker! He brazenly stole the man's money. I've had to triple the pay." Pucker roared, "Triple it?" While negotiating with Pucker, "Given our heavy losses, that's only natural." He drew his sword to deal with Demian. Montauk's years of observational skill told him, "Do you see the blood stain on the end of that staff?" He raised his sword and faced Demian without a hint of fear. "It seems there's a variable beyond expectations." Pucker's face drained of all color. The price to pay tightened his chest, but tripling it. Noticing the hesitation, Montauk feigned impatience and began to sheath his sword. "Fine, I'll withdraw." Seeing that, Pucker panicked. "Wait." Pucker stood rooted, eyes full of doubt and fear as he stared at Demian across the way. At that moment, a dense, murderous pressure radiated from Demian, suffocating the space around him. After fierce inner struggle, he finally gritted his teeth and decided, "I'll pay, triple it." Though it pains him to lose such a sum, he had no choice. If Montauk left, he'd be dead for sure. Seeing his extortion succeed perfectly, Montauk broke into a triumphant smile and sealed the deal. He put on an innocent face and shrugged as if uninvolved. "My men may have been dealt with, but I bear no personal grudge. It's just business." Demian looked at him coldly with no respect. "I do have a grudge. Because of you lot." Their savage shouts still ring in my ears. "This brat, if I catch him, he's dead for sure." The bone-deep pain that tore his body and soul back then, Demian would never forget it even in death. Half his life he lived like refuse in the slums, and his magic core was shattered. From that dark moment, he vowed to himself to avenge at any cost. "I would never let it go easily." His hand tightened on the spear, "So don't ask why I die." Being scorned so arrogantly by a junior wounded Montauk's pride deeply. This sulky brat. The spear's sharp tip suddenly shifted direction, pointing straight at the vulnerable spot between the opponent's legs. This vicious move horrified him. He dared not take another step. That dog is aiming for my crotch, he's no joke. Demian immediately assumed a combat stance, gripping the spear shaft with both hands in a straight line. The clash of weapons rang harsh and piercing, echoing off the four walls of the room. Facing the onslaught of sword strikes, Demian was forced to step back continuously to break the pincer attack. Seeing his opponent defending, Manhwa resorted to a trick. At the moment he worried about guarding his faith. The perfect victory scenario had been drawn up and imagined in his head. "I'll hack his thigh to pieces." His other arm shifted, gripping the blade to prepare the finishing mortal strike. Just as he planned, Demian tilted his head slightly to the side to avoid the direct blow. He summoned all his strength and thrust the sword hard toward Demian's thigh. This is the real move. But what happened next went completely off course, making Manhwa's heart skip a beat. With a light step and graceful footwork, Demian easily slipped aside to dodge the blade. The trick of using the right-hand dagger as an offensive feint was real. Demian exploited the spear's tail, striking forcefully one after another at the vital points across his body. He casually glanced at the man, frozen in shock, and taunted, "I knew it from the start." Manhwa's jaw clenched until it made a sound. "Damn it, you brat." The veins on his forehead and temples twitched violently, saliva spraying with each bestial scream, "I'll kill you." But before the threat finished, a fierce pain struck. His throat convulsed. The pressure points Demian's spear had struck suddenly tore open. Manhwa's strength drained from his body. Demian coldly looked at the defeated man collapsing at his feet. "You're stronger than the likes of Muckman, sure, but you're still just a street thug at heart." After clearing the obstacle in his way, he shifted his gaze to the real target of this trip. Witnessing the horrific scene, Pucker trembled uncontrollably. "Demian, listen to me, let me explain." Ignoring the useless pleas, he stepped forward one step at a time. The fear of imminent death robbed him of reason. He flailed his hands in panic. "Don't come any closer." The pitiful screams echoed through the dense forest and then faded into the quiet of the night. A long time after that bloody night, in a quiet office, a voice said, "Mr. Demian, I'll deposit a total of 6 platinum coins and 650 gold into the account, if that's all right." The first thing Demian did after cleaning up was collect the insurance funds. He carefully checked the terms in the books and replied softly, "I understand." After completing the necessary formalities, he stood and politely bowed farewell. "Many thanks." The man opposite quickly placed a hand over his chest and bowed slightly in respectful reply, "Yes, thank you for your trust." Watching his retreating back, the man hesitated a moment, as if weighing something, then ventured to ask, "May I ask where you intend to go next? Your carriage looks like you're heading far away." Demian had no intention of hiding his plans. "I'm going to enlist." The answer stunned him. "Enlist? You heard correctly. Yes, because I have some people to meet." On the lonely dirt road with few passers-by, only the steady thud of the carriage wheels struck the ground. Demian sat inside the carriage, watching the scenery recede behind him. Thinking of past events, the corner of his mouth involuntarily lifted in nostalgia. "My comrades are there, true, but after all, the army is the only place I belong." After all, in just 5 years, the situation will change completely. Most able-bodied young men will be conscripted. A chaotic wartime era no one can avoid is approaching. Demian slowly placed his hand over his chest. The extreme pain of his past life surged back. Now the fate of having his magic core destroyed in the slums would not happen again. Before deciding to enlist, he spent a great deal of time weighing and considering carefully. Instead of waiting until a late age of 25, volunteering young would be far more advantageous. For now, he'll go to the capital to train with Delph's mana operation method for a week, then apply to training camp number 3. Demian looked up, his deep gaze fixed on the wide sky through the carriage window. "This time I won't be spun by the times like a top." He was determined to shatter the chains of fate with his own hands and take control of it. A week later, the capital's sturdy walls and towering watchtowers finally came into view. The spear tips wrapped in coarse cloth struck the wooden targets with deep, dull sounds. The soldiers and onlookers couldn't hide their amazement. What's up with that kid? He looks like a baby-faced boy. Where did he learn spear techniques like that? Demian paid no mind to their murmurs. His entire focus was on each spear movement. He drew the spear back and looked down at his palm, once soft, now torn from overexertion. Do I need to bandage this? He clicked his tongue in frustration. His body was still too immature. Demian felt annoyed and uncomfortable with his current weakness, a world apart from the calloused hands he once had. A man who had been watching could no longer contain his patience. He cleared his throat to start a conversation. Are you here to enlist? Demian paused, politely turned. Yes, that's right, sir. Reborn skipped the formalities and went straight to the point. Your spear technique looks impressive. Where did you learn it? A flash of high alert crossed Demian's mind. Did this man recognize the First Kingdom spear style? The First Kingdom spear style sounds a bit funny, but it's the most common spear method used by the kingdom's soldiers. His quick mind searched for a plausible excuse to cover it up. It's the spear style my late father taught me. Reborn felt he'd overstepped into family matters. I'm sorry for asking. Demian stood still, radiating uprightness and resolve. It's nothing, sir. Since childhood my father took pride in the army and I was influenced to enlist. His composed manners and noble ideals completely won Reborn over. You're accepted. Demian blinked in surprise and asked, really? Reborn startled, realizing he'd revealed too much. No, I misspoke. To cover his embarrassment, he awkwardly shifted the topic. What's your name? Demian straightened with military posture, one hand placed behind his hip, and announced confidently, I'm Demian. Reborn smiled approvingly and slapped his shoulder in encouragement. All right, good luck with the results. Watching the man's retreating back, Demian politely dipped his head and called after him, yes, thank you. Just as the surroundings fell quiet again, Demian suddenly paused. He felt a warm, steady heat rising from his dantian, spreading throughout his body. This sensation. Demian couldn't contain his emotion and broke into a joyful smile. Now I can use mana. The Delft mana accumulation method, a technique created by a Delft genius 15 years hence, has extremely strict prerequisites but is famed as the most effective method to date. Familiar, warm memories from his past life flashed through Demian's mind. His mana core had been shattered before, so he risked everything training in it, clinging to the faint hope it would work. The image of his comrade Darian returned. Scratching his head, he grumbled, Captain, why do you keep throwing yourself at that training method? Even Bergen, standing beside him, wondered aloud, shrugging. After all, you still can't use mana, right? Teased by his subordinates, Demian glared sharply to scare them off. What, you brats? A light breeze across the training ground brought him back to the present. I used to get teased like that, but it was worth it. The emergence of mana halved my worries. Now I just need to pass the test. Demian stopped training and scanned the vast drill ground. He spotted a group gathered and chatting in the distance and slowly walked toward them, wondering if one of them had been at training camp number 3 with him before. Demian smiled faintly, thinking of his wartime comrade, full of anticipation. What does he look like now? On the wide training ground, the recruits were arranged and gathered in neat horizontal rows. The first test is to lift a boulder. Sounds simple, but hoisting a 30-kilogram rock overhead is no easy feat. It's a great way to weed out recruits who only have shallow enthusiasm. Demian gathered all his strength, channeling power into his arms to heave the large stone above his head. Come on, the official beside him immediately recorded it and announced loudly, Candidate Demian passed. A few drops of sweat ran down his cheek, but Demian's face showed no change. Once you've reached 1-star mana, this challenge is nothing. And so the first test ended. The next event is. Gappo took a deep breath and with his thunderous voice shouted to the entire field, now for the second test. Demian, dwarfed by the broad-shouldered soldiers, stood silently to listen. The endurance run officially begins. Gappo briefly explained the rules. The time limit is 1 hour 30 minutes. You must finish the course before time is up. Shoulder contacts and minor collisions with other contestants are allowed, but no one is to attack another. Demian, having known this rule from his past life, immediately saw through the plot behind that seemingly humane regulation. Because of it, there will surely be stewards disguised among the runners. Scanning the crowd confirmed his suspicion. He spotted several people whose bearing and aura set them apart. Gappo ended his speech with a stern warning. Anyone who veers off the designated course will be disqualified immediately, so remember that. Not only was he unfazed, but the corner of his mouth curled into a knowing smile. This test should be fun. On the ground, a bright red chalk line marked the starting line of the race. While Demian was warming up, a youth suddenly approached. "Shall we team up?" Demian stopped and glanced around as if to confirm. "Me?" The other nodded eagerly, clearly excited. "Yes, you. I've been watching you for a while." Demian found the boy's intentions puzzling. "Watching me? Why?" He observed him silently. "Wait, his face looks familiar." Before Demian could dredge up more memories, Appel stepped closer. "Do you still need me to ask?" He intentionally lowered his voice to a whisper in Demian's ear. "You know how to use mana, right?" Demian cautiously stepped back a pace to keep a safe distance, quickly analyzing the situation. There's no law forbidding civilians from using mana, but ordinary people who can use it usually have either a wealthy clan backing them or some other powerful force behind them. Studying the boy's refined features, Demian's suspicion sparked. Could this be the person who would confirm his doubts? Without beating around the bush, he asked directly, "What's your name?" Appel, slightly surprised by the abrupt question, tapped his nose with his index finger. "My name." He then recovered his composure, placed a hand over his chest, and announced boldly, "I'm Appel." Though Demian had half expected it, hearing the name aloud still shook him. Appel, was he really once at this training camp? The man who would become a grand general and be granted the title of Count at 30, a legend among legends. That name struck Demian like thunder in his past life. He was one of the most successful common-born figures in history, admired by all. Appel offered his hand forward to cement a friendship. "There aren't many our age here, so I'm a bit bored. Let's do our best." Once he learned of the other's illustrious future, Demian's guard quickly fell away. "All right," he reached out and gripped Appel's waiting hand. Since the guy was being friendly, there was no need to be hostile. After all recruits finished their warm-ups, Gappo took the megaphone in one hand. "Everyone, prepare." The moment the starting horn blared, hundreds of people surged forward. Within a few short breaths, Demian, keeping a moderate pace, was overtaken by the group behind him. Seeing their long strides and wind-tearing speed, he thought to himself that they intended to go all out from the start. The other runners belatedly noticed something odd about the lead group. What the hell are they doing? The disguised stewards had now formed a solid line, running across directly in front of the contestants. "Move out." The runners behind strained to catch up while chattering. "Apparently that's the wall of lament. Rumor says getting past it is the real challenge of this test." Appel ran alongside Demian and, hearing this, asked suspiciously, "So can't we just follow them and surge ahead at the last minute?" Demian kept his breathing steady as he ran. That would be a smart tactic, but... He suddenly stamped his foot hard and shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. "Unfortunately, that's not my usual style." Demian's sudden, bold burst of speed shocked Appel beside him. "Huh." At the front, the steward group maintained an extremely steady, unhurried pace. "Conserve your energy. After all, the real race only begins in the last 10 minutes. "Yes, sir, understood." Black's keen ears suddenly picked up the sound of heavy, rapid footsteps closing in from behind. "At this rate, we'll be at the finish line soon." He spun around in astonishment and saw a small figure streaking toward him like a blur. What a crazy kid. Jian was distracted by the pounding footsteps too, another reckless kid this year. Black cautioned preemptively to avoid unexpected incidents. "Don't injure him, just intimidate him enough to scare him off." He rubbed the bulging muscles of his arm and wore a sly grin. "I can't promise what'll happen if he collides with my iron shoulder, but I'll try to go easy." But before his smug smile could fade, a small hand shot from behind, grabbed his shoulder and shoved hard. "Move aside." Jian froze for a beat. "What?" Demian deftly used the push against Jian's shoulder as leverage, springing past and leaving the steward group behind. They had been lax for just a single second, and he had already put a considerable distance between them. When they recovered, Black screamed in panic, "What are you doing? Stop him!" The other stewards snapped out of their stupor and answered, "Yes, sir." Without looking back, Demian could sense the heavy footsteps of their pursuit drawing closer. True, the steward's skills overwhelmed the contestants, but still. He inhaled again, drove power into his legs to accelerate and widen the gap. After all, they're only stewards from the training camp. Witnessing his reckless, spectacular breakaway, Appel behind couldn't help but laugh out loud. What's up with this kid, I wonder? His fighting spirit was also fired up by Demian's action. I can't let him pass me that easily. Appel stamped and surged, leaving the lagging contestants behind as he chased after Demian's retreating figure. The ordinary contestants watching were stunned. What? That's allowed. Let's follow him. Yeah, just copy what he's doing. As a result, when the steward group looked back, they were horrified to see a swelling wave of people charging toward them. What the hell is this? The contestants' cries of enthusiasm carried even across to the other training ground. Zion heard the commotion and turned, puzzled and curious. The situation at Training Ground 2 seems unusual. Zulk, having heard some rumors, lowered his voice to discuss. Apparently a rather odd recruit just enlisted. Should we reinforce with more stewards? While the two hesitated, a deep authoritative voice cut in. Leave them be. They snapped to attention and saluted in unison. Chief Steward Reborn looked toward the noise and asked casually in return, do you want people to think we're rigging the exam results? Whether they break through depends on their own mettle. Watching the small figure leading the other track, Reborn added lightly, and the losers as well. Anyway, my eye for people doesn't fail me, he mentally noted with satisfaction, unexpected that he'd be the kind to create such a wild variable. His action spurred the others to surge forward. On the battlefield, those who lead the purge are precisely the ones who know how to ignite such a flame. At this point on the track, Demian could clearly feel every muscle approaching its maximum tolerance. This was lap 29 of 30. He poured his remaining strength into crossing the red marker line, the final sprint. Appel, with his astonishing stamina, was hot on his heels. Hey, Demian. He glanced over, slightly distracted, to reply. You're still looking pretty fresh, huh? Appel seized the moment, leaned in close and whispered with curiosity, was this your plan from the start? Demian didn't immediately grasp the deeper implication. What do you mean? Appel nodded toward the other contestants collapsed in a corner beside the track. If we didn't know how to use mana, we'd be as miserable as they are. Demian forced his breathing steady and curled the corner of his mouth into a smile. If you've got a trump card, why not use it? Appel grew more and more intrigued by his new companion. You're quite an interesting guy. As they spoke, the two of them crossed the finish line of the final lap together. You too. The official at the finish was still stunned, finally managing to exclaim, both of you passed. In the quiet room stacked with documents, an excited question suddenly rang out. I heard an interesting kid just entered Training Ground 3. Standing not far off, Kassan folded his hands behind his back and confirmed seriously. Yes, Trainer Reborn contacted me about that boy. He said the kid is only 13. That information immediately drew the other's attention. He put his hand on the table and stood up. If someone as picky as Reborn praises the boy as interesting. He paused for a moment, seeming to weigh the value of that assessment. Now I'm getting a bit curious. Leonhardt narrowed his eyes, projecting silent pressure, and asked, so what's the child's name? At the same time, near the tall buildings, a crowd gathered as if something had attracted attention. In the courtyard, a huge bulletin board stood. After reading it, someone grasped their head and groaned, damn, how did I fail? No way, what about you? Amid those laments, many couldn't hide their happiness. I passed. I finally witnessed that scene. Demian felt puzzled. Was that really something to be so happy about? The scene before him involuntarily pulled him back to the hardships of his past life. During wartime, being conscripted was common. Everyone tried to avoid service, checking their soles and heels for blisters. Amid the bustle, he put his hand to his chin and quietly considered. On reflection, things are peaceful now, peaceful to the point of boredom. Then someone called his name, Demian. He turned, puzzled, and Appel waved enthusiastically. Congrats, now we're classmates, right? Those words made Demian glance at the bulletin board. Really? You passed too? Appel nodded. Yes, I checked the list, your name's on it. While talking, he casually pointed to the top spot on the board right at the very top. Demian, 13 years old. He nodded. I just saw it. After passing the competitive selection together, the atmosphere between them grew closer. Help each other out if needed. Still, we might not be assigned to the same unit. Faced with that enthusiasm, he stayed calm and replied, I'm looking forward to it too. Leaving the crowded area, Appel suddenly remembered something and asked, There's a week before enlistment. What are you planning to do in that time? Demian didn't answer immediately. After a few seconds' thought, he said slowly, I'll be pretty busy. Looking into the distance, he added cryptically, I have a few matters to take care of this week. Hearing that, Appel's curiosity was instantly piqued. He stepped closer and draped an arm over his shoulder. What's so important? He just shook his head. Nothing major, just need to buy some essentials before camp. On hearing this, Appel suddenly remembered an important tip and hurriedly added, Oh right, the issued combat boots are stiff. They say you should prepare insoles for the soles and heels. This made him go, really? These things were hardly unfamiliar to Demian. He already knew them from hard-earned experience in the past, but to avoid revealing anything odd about his current identity, he answered sincerely anyway, Thanks, I'll keep that in mind. Appel grinned in delight, No need to thank me. Not wanting the conversation to stay focused on himself, he smoothly switched topics. What about you? What will you do this week? The unexpected question made Appel pause. I have a few things to take care of too. Seeing that awkward expression, Demian realized the other was hiding something. You sure? He asked. However, Demian had no intention of prying. Not my business. All right, take care of your matters. See you next week. I'm off. Appel waved goodbye. Yeah, see you soon. Just then, a stranger silently approached from behind. When only a few steps away, the stranger spoke slowly. Who's there? Hearing the familiar voice, Appel turned around at once. Alan. He couldn't help but recall their earlier conversation. Demian, why do you want to join the army? This surprised him a little. Seeing that reaction, Alan continued explaining what had been bothering him. If you can use mana at that level, you really don't seem like an ordinary person. Hearing that, Demian glanced aside and replied offhand, Are you subtly boasting that you're not ordinary either? That blunt retort made Appel force a smile. Does it really sound like that? The sound of footsteps kept echoing on the ground. After a few beats of silence, he answered, Because this is the only place I belong. Remembering that exchange, the corner of Appel's mouth twitched up. Him too, he must have private troubles he can't share. Then he turned and told himself he had a feeling they'd meet many more times. That remark left Alan puzzled. What? But he just shook his head with no intention of elaborating. It's nothing, let's go. The old man bowed respectfully. Yes, young master, the prepared items are over there. The familiar title made Appel suddenly stop and sigh in exasperation. Alan, I've told you not to call me young master in places like this. The old man followed, leaning on his cane and speaking apologetically. Yes, I'm sorry. Bright sunlight bathed the rooftops along the crowded street. Amid the steady stream of people, Demian walked leisurely, scanning his surroundings. It's hard to believe. Lively haggling mixed with laughter, creating a vibrant atmosphere. Can't you do anything to help me? My God, I told you it's a lost cause. He was a bit surprised. The capital in his memory had been. In an instant, images of gaunt-faced villagers weakened by hunger and their feeble pleas flooded back. Please, just a scrap of dry bread will do. Looking at the bustling street, Demian calculated silently. This atmosphere will change within 5 years. Before then, I must prepare as much as possible. As that thought arose, a string of plans was quickly rearranged to achieve it. First, I need to find the Weak Trading Guild. When an age of war arrives, weapons and practical artifacts on the battlefield, along with provisions, will become the most important things. That's when the role of merchant guilds becomes central. This suddenly reminded Demian of something. In the past, the wealthiest guild on the continent was the Weak Trading Guild. Among ranges of mountains stretching to the horizon, a military unit had temporarily made camp to rest after days of continuous marching. The quiet was quickly broken when a soldier came running from afar, panting. Captain, it seems relief supplies are being brought over there. Looking toward a convoy of approaching wagons, the man wondered, isn't that the Weak Trading Guild? Hearing that, Tyson glanced and said slowly, they say that's the guild now so rich it bursts the seams. This remark immediately made his companion resentful. Damn it, while we're dying on the battlefield there. But before the complaint went further, Demian cut in. Without the wheat and weapons they sell, you know they're donating it for free, right? He looked embarrassed on hearing that. I know, it's just a bitter feeling. As he spoke, his gaze shifted to the wagons piled high with supplies being delivered. But donating such large sums continuously isn't easy. Putting that aside, Demian called out loudly to his comrades, everyone, come collect the relief supplies. Responses rang out across the camp, understood. Standing there observing, Demian quietly watched each person gratefully receive food and necessary supplies. While everyone was busy, Ethan approached from behind and suddenly spoke. Captain, it seems that man is the owner of the Weak Guild. He immediately looked where Ethan pointed and confirmed, the guild master. Ethan pointed to the man fussing with the wagons. Yes, do you see the one in the white cloak at the front? But he looks like a filthy little bastard. As his awareness returned to the present, the blazing sunlight still stretched across the street ahead. Leaning against a wall, Demian quietly reorganized the information he knew. They say Weak had been doing charity even before the war broke out. Of the 40 guilds in the capital, narrowing the scope would leave only about 7 candidates. Since they also engage in charity, I'll start checking the larger-scale guilds first. As the last rays of the day slipped below the horizon, a golden-orange hue slowly spread over the city. After a day roaming everywhere, Demian stopped before the door of a guild at the end of the street. Is this the last one? With that thought, he crossed the threshold and stepped inside. Is anyone here? No sooner had his call sounded than Weak slowly approached from within. How can I help you? At the first sight of him, Demian immediately concluded inwardly, this is indeed the last one. He bowed politely and spoke. I heard the Hamel Guild does charity. I'd like to discuss investing for a good cause. That answer made the man laugh with interest. A young person with such thoughts is commendable. As he moved toward the tea table per the man's guidance, he thought, everything so far has been shoddy, but I still have to check them all one by one. Sitting down slowly, the man smiled kindly and introduced himself proactively. I am the head of the Hamel Guild, Weak. Hearing that name, Demian couldn't help but be taken aback. Weak. Outwardly he remained calm, but waves of emotion surged inside. At last I found him. Suppressing the thoughts swirling in his head, he answered quickly, yes, my name is Demian. The man nodded and gestured to the opposite chair. Ah, pleased to meet you. Let's sit and talk. No sooner seated than Demian could no longer wait and blurted out a somewhat rude question. Do you have any sons? This made Weak puzzled. He stared at him for a few seconds, then suddenly laughed heartily. I have no son, but I do have a daughter who's still immature. This surprised him. A daughter? What is this? Another disappointment, a trick again. No sooner had the words fallen than an unexpected voice rang out, drawing Demian's attention back. The sudden call made Demian reflexively turn. Father, I'm home. Dial stepped in and he immediately recognized her as the Weak guildmaster from his previous life. So you found her. Weak pointed to him and introduced, greet her, child, this is Demian. He's here to invest in our charity fund. Dial adjusted her hair, smiled, and said, greetings, Lord Demian. She asked with eager anticipation, so you said you're here to invest in our charity work? Demian looked up and replied, yes, that's right. He stroked his chin, thinking to himself that something was off. The previous Weak guildmaster had clearly been male, yet these two looked identical and their ages matched. Demian looked Dial over carefully. Don't tell me this pretty face is actually a woman. How did she come to take the name Weak to inherit the guild? She looked at him seriously and inquired, may I ask how much you intend to invest? The guild will allocate funds differently depending on the amount. He covered his mouth with a fist and said gently, for now I'd like to invest 300 gold coins. Depending on how things progress, I'll add more. Dial was startled and covered her mouth. 300 gold? Weak couldn't believe it and double-checked. Are you serious? His eyes narrowed as he put a hand forward to ask, if this is an investment rather than a donation, do you have specific terms in exchange for this money? Demian smiled brightly, clasping his hands together as he stated his request. I want to hold a stake in the Hamel Guild, receiving a portion of the profits to recoup my investment. Weik stared at him, exclaiming in astonishment, a kid with that kind of nerve. He thought silently that for someone so young to have that much money, could it be? Then he cautiously asked, if you don't mind, where does this money come from? Demian closed his eyes and replied without hesitation, you don't need to worry about that. I simply want to use my late parents' inheritance for something useful. Weik quickly bowed his head in apology. I understand, sorry for the rudeness. Demian smiled and waved it off. No problem at all, I completely understand. He looked straight at Demian and requested, we'll have a meeting about guild shares and give you a definite answer then, is that acceptable? Demian paid it no mind and replied, yes, very well, see you all later. As Dial was about to leave, she saw Weik clutching his chest in thought, what's the matter, father? He recalled Demian's mature demeanor during the negotiation and said, aren't you amazed? The boy's only 13. Weik couldn't help but mull it over. That look in his eyes wasn't a joke. He's certainly not an ordinary child. He sighed, holding his chest. What a pity. If the boy were about 5 years older, they'd make a perfect match. Dial flushed bright red and shouted, oh father. Inside the building, a voice cried out in embarrassment. What the hell are you saying, father? Weik paid no mind and teased with a laugh. Who knows, maybe the boy prefers someone older. Dial shouted angrily, stop it, father. After finishing business with the Hamel Guild, time flew like a dog running through a field. In the blink of an eye, enlistment day had arrived. Demian stood alone before the main gate. He looked up ahead and murmured, today truly is a whole new beginning. Demian raised his hand toward the sun overhead. Even if my previous life faded away pointlessly, this life will be different. Then he clenched his fist with determination. This time I will be the one to devour this entire empire. After a while, Demian carried his luggage into the room. His unit was assigned to Training Company 3, 1st Platoon, right? He looked around and saw no familiar faces. Was Appel assigned to a different platoon? Demian placed his belongings on the bed and muttered to himself, it's a pity, around here I'm the only one about my age. At that moment, an excited voice rang out, making him look over. Very pleased to meet you all. A man stood at the door with his hands on his hips and looked in. I'll be the one managing you for the next month. I'm Brian, platoon leader of 1st Platoon. Then Brian held up 3 fingers and counted off. Right now we'll begin inspecting personal gear, food, water. His expression darkened as he curled the 3 fingers into a fist to threaten luxury items, especially anyone carrying alcohol or tobacco. Step forward and confess now. If I catch you hiding anything, you'll get a very entertaining taste of consequences. Demian watched the bunkmates start to panic, protesting they quit smoking but grabbed the wrong thing. The shopkeeper said bringing alcohol wouldn't be detected. He glanced that way and sighed inwardly. Idiots, if you're going to buy it, hide it properly, otherwise don't bring it at all. Brian strode over and barked in a cold voice, empty your bags now. After a while he stood before Demian's bed, looked at the pile of luggage and declared, nothing unusual here. Brian stroked his chin, bent over to inspect and asked, how old are you anyway? You look so young. Demian replied calmly, I'm 13. The remark startled him. 13. Kyle on the bed shouted angrily, holy hell, what era is this that even brats are allowed into the army now? Logan snorted, you think life is a joke. He saw Demian glance over and his face darkened. What are you looking at, kid? You planning to mouth off? He immediately closed his eyes, thinking to himself there's no point wasting words on scum like him, but a bright red light flashed in Demian's eyes as he stared at Kyle. I'll remember this face. I must let him know how painful it is to be beaten senseless by a child. Logan beside him couldn't help hugging himself. What's that? Suddenly my spine feels cold. Brian's voice rang out, you there? He walked up to him and ordered, empty your backpack right now. Logan, hearing this, panicked and explained, this is everything, sir. Brian's expression darkened as he leaned in close and asked, do you want me to personally search your bag? Logan immediately frantically pulled everything from his pack. No need, Commander, I'll dump it out right here. This and also. He stood with his hands on his hips and threatened in a cold voice. Consider this a warning if anyone hides items that I have to personally uncover, especially contraband. The others, thinking of Brian's words, turned pale and prepared to vanish around the drill yard all night. He looked around, urging everyone, hurry up and dump it all out. Demian watched and felt very satisfied. Serves them right. After a while, Brian paced with his hands on his hips and announced, that completes the gear inspection. He turned to the group and announced, now I need to appoint a temporary student squad leader to command the soldiers when I'm absent. Brian reached into his pocket and pulled out a sheet of paper to check. The moment he looked at the paper, he sprang, shouting that there was a recruit in the platoon with an exceptionally high score. After dropping the paper, Brian looked toward the crowd and yelled, Demian, who is Demian? Step forward. His gaze landed on Kyle, who was scowling in a corner. Could it be that guy from earlier? Being a student squad leader requires character as much as ability. Brian approached him and asked, You're Demian, right? At that moment, Demian stepped forward. It's me. He heard this and turned in surprise. Not that guy. Then who is it? When Brian saw him, he widened his eyes and froze. He clenched the paper in his hand and stammered, You said you were only 13 earlier, right? Demian calmly confirmed, Yes, that's right. Kyle, hearing this, glared angrily and sneered loudly, A brat like that wants to be student squad leader? Jesus, since when did the army become a daycare? Brian put his hands on his hips and said, Order in that corner. Kyle kept protesting defiantly, But am I wrong, sir? Kyle stood up and stepped forward, arguing that the student squad leader represents you and therefore must prove leadership ability. Then he pointed a finger at Demian with contempt, letting a kid hold that power will ruin the platoon's discipline. The corner of Demian's mouth twitched into a small smile. I'm not eager for that troublesome post, but this guy sure loves picking fights. Demian silently decided to play along and see how it goes. He tilted his head, scoffed, and taunted, I'm confident I can do better than a brawny fool with no brains. Kyle, enraged, burst out, You little brat, what did you say? Brian glanced over and asked, Your name is Kyle, right? He calmly answered, Yes, sir. I'll continue to hold the position for now. Immediately after, Brian reached out and gently grabbed Kyle by the collar. A murderous aura emanated from Brian as he glared and snarled, If you dare insult a comrade again by calling them a brat or any similar term, next time it won't stop at a warning, understood? Kyle lowered his head and looked up at Brian's stern face, Yes, sir. Brian then looked up at Demian and admitted that his point wasn't without merit. The authority of a student squad leader requires real leadership ability. Kyle raised a hand and proposed, Then how about this, sir? He crossed his arms arrogantly before Demian and said, Why not have me fight this brat? Whoever wins takes the seat. That proves both ability and authority, doesn't it? Brian looked at Demian and asked, Do you agree to this? Demian closed his eyes and thought, Might as well use this chance to reset discipline in the unit. Fine, let's do it. Then he pointed at Kyle and called out, So we just need to smash this blockhead, right? He snapped back angrily, Blockhead. Brian looked to the others in the room and asked if they agreed to the deal. They all answered in unison, Agreed. He led the group out quickly and said, No need for further words, follow me to the training ground for the match. Brian surveyed Kyle's arrogant posture and Demian's composed face, then declared that the match would begin immediately. Brian looked between Kyle and Demian and instructed, The rule is that an opponent must yield to stop the fight immediately. Ready? He smiled triumphantly and said, I'm ready. Demian closed his eyes, nodded, and said, I'm ready. Brian's voice rang out, Then the match begins. Kyle rubbed his shoulder with his other hand and muttered that bullying a kid makes him feel guilty. Demian sighed and urged, Cut the whining and get in here, you oaf. A vein popped on his forehead as he roared in fury, You brat. Kyle's eyes flashed, a bright red light shot out. The reason you're going to get beaten like a dog today is that mouth of yours. Demian stood still and assessed quietly, His speed is better than I thought. Compared to the soldiers from my previous life, he's actually formidable. He watched Kyle's figure close in right in front of him. Demian's gaze fixated on the fist before him, thinking to himself, It's only that much. Then he tilted his body and jumped aside to dodge. There's no way you're hitting me. Kyle couldn't believe what he saw. You dodged. It's like you knew my punch would go that way. He gathered his strength to throw another punch. Looks like he picked up a few tricks somewhere, but this strike shouldn't be dodgeable. Demian tilted his head and smoothly dodged again. Too slow. Kyle slapped his fists together loudly and said, if you dodge this punch, I'll ram my whole body into you. Then he launched himself with all his force toward where Demian stood. He closed his eyes and felt Kyle's hands coming near. He grazed past him again and shouted in anger. What kind of Demian's voice came from behind here? Right after that, Kyle let out a pained cry as Demian landed a blow to his chest. Demian looked up at Kyle, thinking that taking a direct hit like that would make it hard to stay standing. He watched Kyle cry out, steady himself with one hand on the ground. He's tougher than I thought. Kyle's face darkened as he crazily charged this way, shouting, you bastard, I'll kill you. Demian jumped back to avoid the attack. This should finish him. Then he raised his fist and punched Kyle square in the gut. Demian watched him clutch his stomach and collapse to the ground. Direct hit. Kyle's head slammed heavily onto the ground and he fainted on the spot. Demian lightly brushed dust off his hands. Looks like this clumsy guy is knocked out then. He then stared over with murderous intent. Anyone else want to try? Logan and the others looked at each other. Still no one dared to step up. Brian's voice declared the sparring session over. Recruit Demian wins. From now on, Recruit Demian is officially the student squad leader. Later, Kyle walked out of the infirmary and gently closed the door, saying, I'll go ahead. He muttered in annoyance, I never imagined I'd be carried into the infirmary unconscious like this. Kyle couldn't help recalling that punch. He couldn't remember anything after the hit to his right rib. Did he lose consciousness from the very first strike of that kid? Kyle stood silently at the door, thinking to himself that he thought no one here could be his match, yet he lost so miserably. The people in the room were startled as he pushed the door open with a dark expression and walked in. They glanced at Kyle and murmured, what now? Should we stop him? We have to. If we let him keep this up, he'll be back in the infirmary. Suddenly Kyle moved behind them and called out, making Demian look over. He knelt on the ground, bowed his head respectfully and shouted, I admit defeat. From now on I'll consider you my boss. Demian froze, bewildered, thinking what the hell, why is he suddenly acting like this? Did I accidentally hit his head? Kyle looked up and said seriously, you're the youngest opponent I've ever fought, but also the strongest. It's only natural to respect someone stronger. Kyle's voice rang out, please accept me as your junior. Demian was surprised. He expected a rude, arrogant guy, but this one shows proper respect. Then Demian held out a hand to make peace. No need to call me boss, just call me Demian. Demian smiled broadly and added, let's do our best from now on, Kyle. Kyle also reached out and clasped his hand. I'm looking forward to fighting alongside you, Demian. A week at the barracks passed quickly after Demian's group enlisted. Brian put his hands on his hips and barked at the runners, don't stop, keep your eyes on the back of the person ahead and keep running. Demian couldn't help but think how the trainer's brutal routines made time fly. After everyone finished running, Brian raised his hand and announced training was over. Soldiers dismissed to the tents, and you, Demian, come with me. He heard that and followed him curiously. What's this about? Why suddenly drag me off? Demian followed Brian to a room and wondered, the administration office, are they going to make an announcement? He saw people lined up neatly inside and thought, those guys are here too. Demian stepped inside to hear the announcement first, then decide. Mason saw him cover his mouth and exclaimed, where did this tiny brat come from? Oh no, I said that out loud, I should have kept it to myself. Demian looked up. The guy was scrawny, like a little toad. In his head, he pictured the sight. Putting this guy next to Kyle would be hilarious. Their bodies are worlds apart. Mason ground his teeth in annoyance and snapped, what are you staring at? Demian replied calmly, I'm just curious how much wider those eye sockets can open. He shouted in rage but suddenly heard a dry cough and stopped. That brat. Casson frowned and ordered loudly, quiet, is this a place for you to cause chaos? Mason hissed threats under his breath, I'll deal with you later. Above, the voice continued, it seems all squad leaders and their soldiers are gathered here. Casson looked at the crowd and said, "The reason I called you here today is to announce the inter-squad matches taking place next week. This is a critical midterm evaluation for the squads, so squad leaders and soldiers, lead your units and prepare well, understood?" The soldiers below clasped their hands behind their backs and replied in unison, "Understood, sir." Casson told everyone to disperse. "All right, dismissed to your tents." Mason came up beside Demian and shouted, "Hey you brat." He raised his fist menacingly and warned loudly, "This brat doesn't watch where he's going, be careful or you'll get beaten to a pulp." Gerard, standing behind, sneered, "You're the one who doesn't watch where you're going. We're both student squad leaders. Just because you're older doesn't give you the right to boss others around. Instead of standing here ranting, how about training with your squad leader?" Mason, furious, spun back and shouted, "Mind your own business and go somewhere else, or do you want a beating too?" Gerard smiled and replied, "That remains to be seen. Let's see who actually gets beaten." Then he gestured toward Demian and said, "Leave that lunatic alone, let's go." You chimed in, "Yeah, let's go." Demian, walking ahead, snorted contemptuously. He turned and asked, "Which squad are you in?" Mason proudly thumbed up and introduced, "Squad 4, I'm the squad leader of Squad 4. The corner of Demian's mouth curved into a bright smile. "All right, I'll remember that. See you at the squad match, you idiot." Walking down the corridor, Gerard called out, "You're Demian, right?" You asked in surprise, "How did you know my name?" Gerard smiled and explained, "I heard your name from Appel in my squad, heard you got first in practical skills." He looked at Demian and formally introduced himself, "I'm Private Gerard, squad leader of Squad 3. The next squad match will rely on your ability." You placed a hand on your hip and replied, "It's nothing." Back in the room, Demian loudly and seriously called out, "Attention everyone." Kyle stood up and walked over to ask Demian what's going on. Demian's voice announced, "In 1 week there will be an inter-squad match between the squads and us." He thought of that victory flag and declared, "We must win first place at all costs." Demian slapped his hands once and said, "One thing you must remember, among the 3 squads we're facing." He raised both hands and announced, "We will utterly crush Squad 4 especially." Demian mimed cutting his throat with his thumb and instructed, "The squad leader of Squad 4 must be beaten to a pulp, understood?" Demian looked at the gathered crowd and thought, now that we've entered week 2 of training, the atmosphere on the field is completely different. The commander stared seriously at the papers in his hand and said, "The army's goal is to win the competition, and starting this week you'll learn formations, which are extremely important in matches." The squinty man looked down at those below and reminded them, although this is a team event, we'll still award individual points to soldiers who demonstrate outstanding skills, so show yourselves. The group shouted in unison, "Understood, sir." Demian thought, individual points too? Nice, everyone at the training camp wants high scores to be assigned to their preferred branch. The corner of his mouth lifted in a delighted smile as he thought, then let's just give it our all and see. Lalan then drew a shape in the air and said, "Today we'll learn the triangular formation, an attacking formation used to pierce enemy lines." Demian thought, the triangular formation, huh? Information about it immediately came to mind. This formation has tremendous striking power like a giant arrow, but its weakness is that if the lead point collapses, the rear will disintegrate. Demian glanced at Kyle beside him and thought that if the leader is strong enough, it creates a devastating force. Luckily, our team has someone perfect to be the spearhead. Then Lalan clasped his hands behind his back and announced, "We'll practice the triangular formation now, split into 2 groups and quickly form triangles, move it." Demian looked at him and told Kyle, "You go to the other side, I'll command this formation." Kyle snorted coldly, "This time I won't lose." He stepped in front of the group and waved slightly, "All right everyone, come here. I'll show you a trick for the triangular formation the instructor just taught." Kristen asked skeptically, "What trick? Have you done this before?" Demian replied calmly, "My father served in the military, so I learned it from him." The group leaned in to hear as he began to explain. The others will definitely arrange the triangle exactly as the instructor said, and when it charges forward. Adrian clenched his fist and shouted, "Sounds good." Kristen raised his fist grinning, "Let's give it a try." Hearing that, Demian put his hands on his hips and called out, "The stronger ones stand right behind me, the shorter ones take the outer shield positions." He gripped the shield, looked back and reminded them, "Remember to raise the shield high, at least to head level." They replied in unison, "Understood." Demian looked up toward the opposite side. They seem to have prepared their defense well, but whatever they do is useless. He concluded quietly, "We'll just ram straight through." Then he looked back and ordered, "Don't slow down, finish it in this charge." Lalin also waved his arm to signal, "The match begins." A voice rang out, "Left foot," an excited shout, "Left foot." The clamor echoed across the field, "Left foot." Demian glanced over and smiled faintly, thinking it's good they held formation on their first try. They advanced without breaking ranks. His brows knit tightly. "All right, we're closing on Kyle's formation." Then he shouted to urge them on, "Speed up, brothers." On the other side, Kyle's men marched in step, continuously shouting, "Left." A purple light radiated from Demian. He thought to himself, "It's my turn to act. During endurance drills, I didn't bother using mana." He considered silently that in moments like this he had to use it. Then he shouted once. He slammed his shield hard against Kyle's shield and pushed forward. Demian pressed the shield with all his strength, excitedly commanding, "Shove harder, punch into the gap as planned." In his head he calculated that by targeting a weak spot instead of charging into a person, the enemy would be momentarily confused, and at that exact moment someone shouted, "Who will stop him?" Demian's eyes lit up as he stared back, "Let me handle it." He looked at the created gap and shouted, "Opportunity, now." Immediately long staffs from Demian's side struck the knees of the opposing soldiers simultaneously. Logan was thrown backwards, startled and shocked. What the hell was that? Kyle turned to the collapsing ranks and yelled, "What are you doing? Get up now." He then turned toward Demian and shouted angrily, "Damn it, I'll deal with you first." Immediately after, Demian charged with his shield. "Kyle, did you forget your opponent is me?" Kyle's face darkened. He barked coldly, "Move aside, Demian." He heard that, raised his shield to block and asked, "You told me to move aside." Kyle answered seriously, "Yes, when you appeared beside me I called out, huh." Then he gently rammed downward with force, knocking Kyle to the ground. From above, Demian looked down and laughed, "Kyle, your build is impressive, but you need to learn to use your strength at the right time and place." Lalin stood still watching the fight and thought the kid was far better than he'd expected. He stared at Demian's slight figure. His physique wasn't remarkable, so it's hard to believe he's the same rookie class as the others. Then Lalin spread his hands and declared, "Stop, the winning team in this sparring session is Demian's team." Demian reached out in praise, "Well done, Kyle, grab my hand and get up." Kyle said, "Next time I'll definitely beat you." Then he asked, "Hey Demian, what tactic did you use?" Kyle's men behind also demanded, "Did you deliberately target our weak spot? How could we possibly defend against that?" The crowd around him clamored, "Why don't we use this move in the squad matches, Demian, like earlier?" The sunset dyed the place. Demian watched Kyle and Logan training nearby. These guys usually bolt back to the barracks as soon as practice ends, yet now they're sitting down to review and practice together. The corner of his mouth lifted in a smile as he thought, this atmosphere is good, keep this momentum and we won't have to worry about the tournament. Suddenly a piercing voice rang out, "Is that brat really the squad 1 leader?" Demian let out a puzzled sound and looked over. Hayden pointed over and shouted, "Look, he's standing there directing practice." Aston sneered loudly, "What's wrong with those guys? Who in their right mind would listen to a brat as their boss?" Logan, dark-faced, glared at those dogs and asked what they said. "Brat," Shivo spat in annoyance, "those bastards." Hayden spread his arms to provoke further, "Youngsters are just brats, what's wrong with that?" Aston laughed along, "You can tell how trash that squad's skill level is just by looking." Mason stepped out from behind, sneering, "Forget them, it's not their followers' fault, it's that pompous kid who didn't know his limits and made himself squad leader." Demian turned and muttered under his breath at him, "That guy again, does he just crave getting beaten?" Then he shook his head lightly and thought, "Never mind, no point tiring myself provoking these tiny pests, we'll crush them in the tournament anyway." He calmly ordered, "Squad 1 dismissed to the barracks." Suddenly a voice barked, "What the hell are you dogs yapping about?" Demian looked up and was shocked by the scene before him. Logan's crew, furious, surged forward shouting, "If you meet our squad in the tournament, you're dead, filthy bastards, wait for us to come and smash you." Kyle pointed at Mason and yelled, especially that squinty-eyed guy up front, "Better start preparing your coffins." He steamed with rage, then turned and asked Demian, "Those bastards you just insulted are from Squad 4, right?" You startled and confirmed, "Huh, yeah, that's right." Kyle and the others stared at the group, clapping their fists together. "Those bastards, we have to beat them to a pulp." Then the group got fired up and shouted, "Even during break we'll keep training. When we face Squad 4, I'll wipe their faces with the floor." Demian watched them and thought, "I didn't expect these guys to be so easily provoked, but who knows?" He couldn't help but smile brightly. This is going to be tasty. That night inside Morris's office, he leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed and asked, "Have you seen any promising recruits in this batch?" Reborn replied seriously, "Yes, sir. There are a few with potential, but 2 stand out above the rest." Morris immediately took the file to read. "Both are still quite young. Do they have anything special?" Reborn said, "I'm not entirely sure, but it seems they've learned how to control mana." He was startled and asked again, "Mana? Do those 2 recruits come from influential families?" Reborn stood at attention and answered, "It seems there's nothing particularly special about their backgrounds, sir." Morris looked down, calculating silently. Most trainees are commoners. Learning mana cultivation methods costs a fortune, so to ordinary people mana is a distant, mysterious power. He stared at the 2 profiles and murmured, "Recruit Demian enlisted after losing both parents, and Recruit Appel's family is similarly ordinary. Precisely because they're so ordinary it makes me uneasy." Immediately after, Morris looked up and asked, "Oh, by the way, I heard there was a scuffle between the squads earlier." Reborn closed his eyes and reported, "Yes, sir, actually that commotion was related to Recruit Demian." He thought of Mason's group provoking others, saying Demian was too young to be a student squad leader. Reborn recalled Logan's crew and added that some squad leaders and other team members looked down on him, but Squad 1 flew into a rage which ended up uniting their team. Morris couldn't help but confirm, so Squad 1 has accepted that kid as their leader. Reborn bowed his head and affirmed, "Yes, sir, that's correct." Morris propped his chin with one hand and said, "Interesting." He wagged a finger and said, "If that's the case, let's try this." He leaned in to hear Morris's full plan. After listening, Reborn was startled and asked, "But don't you think that could backfire?" Morris propped his head with one hand and smiled faintly. "If it does, it just shows their abilities only go that far." Morris added, thinking of Kyle's group, "If their unity is strong, then testing it once would be well worth it, so." His eyes flashed greedily as he ordered, "Increase training intensity for Squads 1 and 4, those who fought each other, crank it up to the maximum." Kyle's men suddenly shivered and turned to look back. "What's this? Why am I suddenly getting goosebumps?" Inside the room, someone on the bed groaned, "Oh great, why are they adding extra training hours?" The person beside him chimed in, "I heard only our squad and Squad 4 are being punished with extra drills." Carter clenched his teeth and complained, "They even added crawling exercises." Another grumbled, "Punishing us for a few curse words is a bit much, isn't it?" Kyle glanced back and asked Demian, "Isn't this a bit unfair?" He heard it and pondered silently, "Crawling exercises." Demian closed his eyes, thinking he already knew their intent, then said, "Fair or not, what else can we do?" He stood and walked toward the group and asked, "Do you lot think this is a vacation?" Demian turned to them and said, "These crawling drills will leave you aching, but if we get through them, our endurance will surpass the other squads. Everyone understands the real purpose of these exercises, right?" Shivo raised an eyebrow and muttered, "Damn, even that kid can see that." Another couldn't help but think, "If I complain here, I'd be worse than a 13-year-old kid." Demian closed his eyes and laughed, "It's going to hurt a bit the first time, but I'll have your backs, so give it your all." Another complained, "They're not seriously going to make us crawl on that gravel field, are they?" He looked up and asked, "So you want them to lay out soft cushions for you to crawl on?" Kyle, incredulous, asked, "Demian, your tone makes it sound like you've done this a lot before." Demian closed his eyes and thought, "I've been through this plenty." In his head, Demian remembered his previous life, how many times he had to crawl on his belly just to keep his life. He quietly sighed, but that isn't the real meaning behind the crawling exercise. Demian couldn't help but think about forcing crawling drills into an already exhausting schedule when everyone's bodies were covered in scrapes and bruises. Someone grabbed another by the collar and shouted, "What did you just bark, you dog?" Demian thought silently that tempers would flare and the squad's internal conflict would inevitably start. He looked toward the group and reflected that enduring the pressure from this drill is the real purpose of adding it. They want to see which holds up better between Squad 1 and Squad 4. Demian squatted at the foot of the bed, pulled out a chest. Since intentions are out in the open, there's no way he'll sit still and take it, then shouted loudly, "Brothers, bring out everything issued to you and let's see." Darian, puzzled, asked all of them, "Why are you suddenly pulling out all the socks? Your voice carries from now on." Demian smiled brightly and yanked the socks free. "I'll perform a little magic and make these talismans for the drill." The next morning, the instructor stared down and asked if Squad 1 was fully assembled. Demian's team shouted back, "Present, sir." He looked down and introduced himself. "All right, I'm Nielsen, the instructor in charge of your crawling drills. Today we'll learn low crawl technique. Assistants, take your positions." Nielsen clasped his hands behind his back and instructed the captain. "Low crawl means you press close to the ground, keep your arms straight with the spear and move quickly by coordinating crossed arms and knees." Then he pointed at the net ahead and asked, "Now you'll cross that obstacle course using this low crawl technique. Ready?" Squad 1 shouted excitedly, "Ready, sir." Nielsen thought to himself that at least these guys still had some fighting spirit, unlike Squad 4. He grew serious and ordered loudly, "Group 1, sweep the obstacle course for me, go." Squad 1 all dropped into the crawl and quickly moved under the net. Nielsen closed his eyes, puzzled. It's only the second week and they're already doing crawling drills. Normally that's week 4. What on earth is the company commander planning? He looked up at the group and muttered that crawling over terrain like this will hurt, not just tire them. They'll be stumbling and falling all over the place. Suddenly Nielsen widened his eyes, startled by the scene before him. He watched them nearing the finish and wondered aloud, what the hell? What kind of insane speed are these kids clearing the obstacles at? Nielsen's expression darkened in bewilderment. What's going on? It's clearly their first time crawling. From behind, a voice called out, reporting instructor. Someone asked hesitantly when Group 2 should go on the course. Nielsen snapped and pointed over. Group 2, start. Squad 1 lunged toward the iron net in excitement. Nielsen glanced between the sides and couldn't help thinking these guys were strange, like a pack of battle-crazed, starving fighters. Demian held his head and smiled. The instructor couldn't have expected us to be this smooth on day 1. This must be the first time his crawling class has seen a case like this. Kyle crawled out, pumped up. "Demian, that's awesome." Another guy shouted excitedly that he even had to fake pain and exhaustion earlier. That guy rolled up his sleeve and cheered that terrain crawling does hurt a bit, but this trick is a real lifesaver. Darian praised excitedly, "Cut the socks into pads for elbows and knees. Demian, you're a genius." Then Nielsen's voice announced that Squad 1's crawling exercise was complete and everyone dismissed to the barracks. Kyle glanced over and asked, "Demian, where did you learn that trick?" Demian didn't turn and said, "From my late father," but it came with a warning. Kyle, hearing this, asked what it was. He smiled faintly and replied, "Never let the instructor catch you." Demian recalled the instructor's furious face. "You little brats have guts to pull tricks on me. Everyone down, low crawl 100 laps around the training ground now." Kyle laughed and smacked him on the head. "Genius, called it out right away." Demian turned to look, thinking, why does that guy always hit so hard? Maybe he's taking personal revenge. He looked toward the nearby weapons and mused that now only shield and spear drills remained. Finally, he'll learn the kingdom's top spear techniques. Demian recalled that image pensively. The kingdom's top spear arts, fools would look down on it compared to the noble house's famed spear techniques, but trained to the highest level, it's a supreme art rivaling any school. He remembered his previous life situation. Unfortunately, most people learned only the basics and shelved it. In my last life, this spear art was my only turning point. Demian recalled that person's figure. He trained it through life and death struggles, finally achieving decent results and truly breaking through only after meeting his master. The corner of his mouth lifted into a slight smile. Master, wonder if that old man is still as eccentric as before. Surely we'll meet again someday. Across from them, Squad 4's group was loudly complaining. Crawling on sharp gravel like this, are they crazy? Kyle looked up and said, looks like Squad 4 just finished too, but those guys. Mason snarled angrily, shut your mouths, will you? Stop whining for me. Demian and Kyle were both startled and surprised to hear that. The men around Squad 4 immediately shouted in dissatisfaction, what did you just bark? You think being a squad leader makes you hot stuff, acting like you're some big boss. Carter laughed, saying the other side looks like they're about to come to blows. Logan added, without those pads we'd probably be yelling at each other like that too. Kyle slapped his friend on the shoulder and laughed, lucky indeed, Demian's pads really saved our skins. Mason glared up in fury, those bastards, they're still in the mood to laugh over there. Hayden asked irritably, they had to crawl just like us, so how come they look untouched? Mason yelled in rage, I'm betting they're cheating. If it wasn't for those idiots, we'd never be punished with these drills. He clenched his fist and cursed loudly, you scoundrels. He vowed inwardly that with the inter-squad competition in a few days, he'd crush every one of them. Mason's face turned fierce as he glared and snatched the champion spot. Demian remained calm and faced him. Time passed swiftly, and finally the day of the inter-squad competition arrived. The instructor looked down and asked if all 4 squads were fully assembled. The groups called back in unison, present, Commander. He continued, I'll call the squads by match order soon, be ready. Kyle turned and shouted Demian. He looked back at him puzzled, what's up? He frowned and glanced at Demian, asking, you look different today, am I imagining things? Kyle's voice continued, something's definitely changed, but I can't pinpoint it. Did you get taller? You're at that growth age, right? Logan behind laughed excitedly, Kyle, Demian was already tall. Someone nearby chimed in, yeah, he's just unnaturally big, stop teasing him. Demian glanced that way, thinking angrily that the guy must sense things instinctively. In his head, the image of last night surfaced. Actually, last night he had broken through to the 2nd level of his mana cultivation method, so his mana reserves had increased significantly. Demian pondered the purple light that had enveloped him. Since joining this training camp, his daily mana practice had finally borne fruit. Then he loudly called out to raise Kyle's curiosity, Kyle. Demian said seriously, in this inter-squad tournament, I want our squad to win by an overwhelming margin. He thought of the opportunity. The top 5 soldiers in the tournament would be rewarded by choosing any piece of equipment they wanted from the armory. Demian bowed his head and thought. People usually chose one-use defensive enchanted weapons or armor, but those at best were only grade C. He clenched his fist thinking of the mother-of-pearl ring. That wasn't his target. In his last life he heard a subordinate at training camp 3 mention it. Demian stared at it thoughtfully. There was a ring with an exceptionally good special ability, an item with a continuous activation effect, so it had to be at least grade A. He tightened his fist and pondered that to get it he'd have to win this tournament and seize first place. If Appel also knew how to use mana beforehand, the guy might snatch it from him. He then looked up and asked, you think we can do it? Kyle chuckled softly and confirmed, of course we can. Then he slapped his hands together hard. Kyle looked down at the men below and asked, you heard that, right? The squad leader says we're going to crush this tournament, clear as day, right? They shouted roaringly, full of fighting spirit, first place is definitely ours. Kyle turned back saying it seemed everyone was united. Demian closed his eyes and smiled, great. Right after that the instructor's voice sounded, I'll now announce the match schedule for the first round, Squad 1, step forward. Demian led the way forward, grinning, let's charge straight to the peak of glory, brothers. As the squads presented themselves, the instructor loudly explained the details. The squad tournament would split into attackers and defenders, swap sides after a round and fight 2 total practice rounds. The rookies' faces all turned serious as each word echoed. Attackers who fail to seize the flag within the time limit lose automatically, Squad 2. And of course Demian and the other Squad 1 rookies had no objection to the instructor's next order: prepare to attack first. After hearing the instructions, he turned to his subordinates and emphasized each word: just do exactly like we practiced. They answered in unison, loud and clear. Satisfied, Demian shifted his gaze to the strongest rookie in the team. Kyle, you remember the plan, right? On my signal, smash straight into the people in front with everything you've got. He answered cheerfully, don't worry, when it comes to raw strength, I'm confident. Once both sides finished forming up, the instructor raised his voice to the maximum and declared, the match begins. As the attacking side, Squad 2 charged forward in a triangular formation at top speed, crushed them. The Shivo men tightened their wooden shields to resist the incoming pressure and shouted, hold your positions, don't let the formation break. Squad 2 ran into unexpected difficulty breaking through. Everyone couldn't believe it. What the hell is with these guys? There's not a single gap, they look like an unyielding fortress. Watching from the high stand, the instructors couldn't help commenting. So Squad 2 attacks first, but Squad 1's formation looks odd, lining up that densely just to stand and take it doesn't make sense. Unexpectedly, the next moment brought a strange turn as a rough roar echoed through the area and drew the Lawland troops' attention. Push forward. It turned out the sound came from Kyle, who was enthusiastically overwhelming the opposing group. Everyone in Squad 2 panicked. They were being pushed back. Alex, the flag bearer, gritted his teeth and barked orders that were almost meaningless to troops already driven down and unable to raise their heads. Hold your ground, I said, hold your ground. His thin brows knitted tightly with each roar. You bastards, were the attackers here, shut up and defend. But in the next moment, Demian, standing where he could see the whole battlefield, shouted just one word, Kyle. No long instructions needed, that alone was the switch that triggered his berserk mode. This time I'm going all out. Facing the terrifying onslaught from the enemy, Squad 2's morale plunged into an abyss. What the hell is that? That monster. He isn't even using a shield, he's ramming with his shoulder. And because of that reckless charge, Demian's teammates had to speed up toward their leader. Kyle immediately urged them, stand beside me. In the next instant, even though Squad 1 was supposed to be defending, they became the attackers as Kyle decisively broke into the enemy formation and kept pushing forward. Confronted with this horrifying scene, even Alex went pale and ground his teeth. How are they coordinating so perfectly? They clearly practiced as much as we did. With sharp eyes, Demian quickly captured the moment and shouted orders. They've shown a weakness, Squad 1, all-out attack. Without pause, a new brutal assault erupted, white smoke billowing across the wide field. Seeing the unbelievable turn of events, Lawland stammered to Brian, who led their group. What's going on? Squad 1 leader, did you make them do extra practice? After hesitating, Brian replied, I'm surprised too. A surge of panic and sweat ran down his cheek. He hadn't expected basic trainees to perform this well. This level is no different from elite troops with special training. He turned his gaze to the quiet figure at the back of the energetic ranks. The reason they pulled this off was obviously that kid. Now in Brian's eyes, Demian showed decisive command. Issue the proper orders, widen to both sides to create space. This time we have to shatter Squad 2's formation. Memories of seeing them train replayed in his mind. Squad 1 voluntarily stayed after class every day to practice, with Demian fixing their weak spots. No wonder they're reaping the rewards now. Meanwhile, each of his subordinates showed the steadiness and techniques he had taught. Hold your shields up, not below shoulder height. Do exactly as Demian instructed. Watching the positive results, Brian couldn't contain his excitement. At first, I worried a kid that young as squad leader wouldn't work, but he's proven himself by actual ability. Spotting Alex in view, Demian decisively shouted, Kyle, right now. Their minds linked to an extreme degree. Those few words made Kyle perfectly understand his intent. Where's the flag? Barreling his teeth like a toothpaste ad smile, Alex was startled when he noticed it. Got it. Panic surged and Alex became disordered, sweat pouring over his body. Stop attacking him, just focus on stopping him. Contrasting with the nearly broken spirit in Squad 2, Squad 1 still burned with terrifying morale. Not yet, brothers, form up. Amid the rolling white smoke, Kyle casually flashed an amused smile. You idiots. Those opposite were all stunned. What? Why did that ox of a guy suddenly stop? The curve of excitement on his lips never fell for a moment. You just walked into our trap. Their success caused no small alarm among the leaders. A trap. While they were still startled by the enemy's announcement, a figure slammed his foot into the ground and rushed forward like the wind. With the small feet of a typical 13-year-old, the figure was none other than Demian, agile and swift. Good job, Kyle. He launched his small body into the air, his sharp eyes fixed on a single target. Before Alex could react, the tip of Demian's staff drove straight into the opponent's chest with such force it knocked him onto the rough ground. As the man screamed in pain, the instructor timely announced, "Time's up," since the attackers, Squad 2, failed to seize the flag. Standing over his fallen enemy, Demian raised the red flag high and echoed the spirited declaration, "We won." And of course, after the grueling match, the blue-haired instructor reminded them to take a short break before switching sides. Those in the back couldn't help sighing. Amazing, Squad 1 might run an unstoppable winning streak. But someone promptly objected, "No, it's not certain yet." A finger wrapped in a red uniform glove pointed to one side. "Look over there, that level." At that moment, the other two teams were still locked in fierce combat. By his reckoning, they'd be a worthy match for Squad 1. A surge of fury like a volcanic eruption made a rookie stomp the ground. Damn it for real, it's fate, isn't it? It turned out the observation came from some squad leader who was starting to see things go poorly for him. Squad 3, our first opponent, I was only planning to warm up now, then crush Squad 1 later. With Hayden among the shield bearers, the one brooding and angry thought was Mason. Why are they standing there stiff as statues, not moving an inch? We already lost our turn badly, if we lose this too. Unable to hold back his rising anger, he yelled nonsensically, "What the hell are you doing? Forgot the plan? Do exactly what I told you." As expected, he immediately drew a volley of challenging reproaches from his men. "If you're so great, then charge in and do it. What kind of squad leader hides and talks big all day?" Mason raged in his head. Damn it, awful coordination and nobody's motivated at all. At the same time in Squad 3, Gerard, as leader, calmly asked the teen beside him, "Appel, those guys over there look exhausted. Should we rush in and punch through their line?" Appel decisively shook his head. "No need." A moment later, he calmly laid out the plan, his green pupils showing clear confidence. "Hold your positions and target their shield bearers. If we prolong it, they'll break on their own." Hearing this, Gerard nodded in agreement without objection, even though the boy was clearly younger than him. "Okay, do that." In his mind, he kept turning it over. Appel didn't expect a 14-year-old to read the situation and the enemy's weakness so quickly. With his own sharp eyes, Gerard quickly formed several suspicions about the boy's background. They'd only met 2 weeks ago, but he was curious about the kid's family. This kid is clearly a commoner. He couldn't be. Not letting it distract him long, he issued the necessary orders. Concentrate all pressure on their shield bearers, maintain formation, and hold your positions. Thus another brutal clash erupted with neither side giving ground. Hayden, as the leader, shouted defiantly with furrowed brows, "You bastards, if you're so tough then charge in and fight. Stop wasting time with that cowardly stalling." But Gerard could gauge the situation from Hayden's bluster. Squad 4's strength and morale had hit rock bottom. The best outcome would be them losing patience and charging forward. Contrary to his expectations, Hayden, who had just shouted, now despaired to the point of foaming at the mouth. "I can't hold on any longer." Regardless, the signal had come. Gerard decisively shouted the order to his men. "Squad 3, the opportunity is now." The group tensed and lunged forward to break Squad 4's defensive formation with brute force and thunderous roars. No matter how exhausted they were, Hayden's team tried to brace their whole bodies to hold the line. Don't fall if the shield bearers collapse. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple when Gerard turned and called Appel's name. As soon as the words left his mouth, Appel charged toward the layered shields. He stomped on them without hesitation. Clearly this was a makeshift springboard made for this exact moment. Sure enough, in the next instant, Appel catapulted himself upward, mirroring what Demian had done minutes earlier. Channeling a terrifying surge of mana within him, he concentrated it into the staff in his hands. With only his own strength, Appel sent Squad 4 crashing down in a staggering collapse. Watching from what he thought was a safe spot, Mason's brow tightened in horror. What the hell are you useless lot doing? He even remembered the bet with Demian. Damn it, with moves like that, how are we supposed to beat Squad 1? And at that moment, he caught sight of the boy calmly standing there. Watching the unimpressive display from a not-too-distant distance, the boy sighed. It's over. Sure enough, the instructor's voice rang out. Practice match over, Squad 3 wins. Seeing the one being cheered under the blue sky, Demian immediately judged, that Appel is no ordinary kid, he'll be a tough opponent. Turning his back decisively, he adjusted his mindset. The real fight will be against Squad 3. Mana surging, a thrill curved his lips. Looking forward to it. See you in the finals, Appel. After a short rest following the grueling matches, the instructor announced, breaks over, all squads assemble on the training ground. As they moved forward, Kyle asked the person beside him to confirm, Demian, we're smashing Squad for this match, right? He replied calmly and boredly, right, this is their last chance, they'll struggle to grab an honor point for sure. Meanwhile, he bared his teeth in exhilaration. That's the fun part, I'll smash the mouth of any brat who calls you a kid. Demian shrugged it off, I've already marked that guy, Kyle, just clear the way for me. Facing his subordinates, he listed the enemy's weaknesses without hesitation. All right, they're exhausted and poorly coordinated. Exuding an almost sinister aura that even the clear sky seemed to yield to, Demian emphasized each word. I'm not going easy, we must strike faster and hit harder, we have to crush them this match. As soon as his last word fell, Kyle's crew erupted with excitement and laughter. I've been waiting for this moment, make them pay for talking big. After the cheers died down, he, as the formation leader, immediately became stern and ordered, finish this quickly and cleanly, everyone focus. No one objected. Logan's group kept smiles at the corners of their mouths and replied, agreed. Then, at that moment, Squad 1's ranks readied themselves, each member brimming with fierce spirit and seriousness on their faces. In contrast, Squad 4's troops were full of apprehension after their crushing loss to Squad 3. Not only highlighting the difference between the two forces, Demian, as commander, wore a confident expression. While Mason scowled as if Demian owed him money, the instructor's voice signaled, begin the match. With Squad 1's terrifying momentum leading the attack and a resounding shout, charge men. Before long the distance closed, and they held their formation as they charged. Unlike when he was only observing Squad 2 from the back, Demian could now see Squad 4's execution up close and plan accordingly. Their formation looked much looser than he expected. At this level, a straight-on ram would break them. A confident smirk crossed his face as he readied himself, but it had to be thorough and perfect. I'll crush them to paste so no one dares make a sound again. With flawless coordination and the released force, Demian shoved the biggest guy in their group, Kyle. With just the combined strength of the two of them, a fierce collision erupted between the opposing sides. Obviously, Squad 4 was jolted by the brutal gust Demian himself had created. What is this? What kind of monstrous strength is this? Always standing in the safest spot, Mason could only shout in rising panic, not understanding. What are those guys doing? Brace your asses and hold the defensive line. Useless lot. Sweat poured off him like an autumn downpour. Shield bearers, protect the flag, stop their direct assault. And the spear team. Too bad for him. While he kept jabbering, Kyle and Demian repeated the move they'd used against Squad 2. In an instant, Mason flinched at the sight of the boy hovering in midair. I told you I'd remember your face, didn't I? It's you. He clenched his teeth as the sense of danger surged so intensely, Mason stood there unsure how to react. With no surprise at all, his right arm was casually disabled by the boy. By the time Demian landed lightly, Mason was doubled over, his shoulder aching. Rage overrode reason. He hissed through clenched teeth full of hatred. You bastard, don't look down on me like that. True to his deep hatred for Demian, he didn't hesitate to pick up the wooden staff he dropped. You think I'm a straw dummy? At the next moment, Mason charged as if the kick hadn't meant anything. In a fair one-on-one, scum like you aren't worth a rusty nail. He exhaled in frustration. For someone battle-hardened like Demian, Mason's attack was terrible and predictable. He didn't even bother to prolong it and simply grabbed the opponent's staff. Is that all you've got? Clearly, Mason lacked the strength to hold onto even that splinter of wood. He tossed his shield aside and nonchalantly performed a brilliant staff flourish, the weapon already flying free. In the next moment, he didn't hesitate to strike again at the wound he'd caused with the earlier kick. Kicking the enemy coolly, lethal intent flooding the air as Demian's mana poured out with each motion. Dropping your weapon on the battlefield is like kneeling and begging to be killed, you idiot. Not content with mere threats, his fist tightened and gathered mana. Remember this day, it's useful advice for keeping your life. Giving Mason no chance to counter, a heavy punch struck his face as Demian spat two words, understand. Witnessing this horrific scene, the instructor finally couldn't stand idly by and rushed over. Squad 4 Captain, are you all right? Demian simply sighed in exasperation. He had lost count of how many times that day. Too easy, boring, won't even bother to comment. Meanwhile, the instructor personally felt the sharp, commanding gaze from Demian and hesitated to speak. He judged that Squad 4 could no longer continue the match. At that moment, Demian's hand was picking up the wooden staff before anything else followed. Therefore, the victory in this match was indisputable. He raised the green flag high in his hand as the instructor from Squad 1 announced it. Despite having just gone through a rough bout, Kyle was still full of energy and let out a hearty laugh, feeling exhilarated. The other recruits were equally cheerful. Demian really is something else, top tier. Seeing Mason carried away on a stretcher by two people, Squad 4's members were genuinely terrified. Isn't that Squad 1's captain supposed to be only 13? How can his skill be so overwhelmingly powerful? Watching from the high stand, someone finally couldn't help but sigh. He's truly a born genius. Nielsen became even more certain as he praised, he might even outclass some of our trainers. Rudolph beside him had to chuckle, nodding in agreement with the man's remark. I can't argue with that either. Who would have thought a larger figure had appeared next to us and raised a question? What's all the commotion here, kids? This display successfully drew both attention and puzzlement from him. Facing them then was none other than Leonhard Belkalin, the head trainer of the kingdom's 3rd division. Seeing who had arrived, no one dared delay. They all straightened up respectfully. Greetings, glory to the kingdom. Paying them no mind, Leonhard went straight to the main subject within view. Brian, is that the kid you told me about? He looked toward Demian, who was being lifted by the first squad after the overwhelming victory, and nodded to confirm to his superior. Yes, that's him, sir. A slight amused curl at the corner of his mouth, Leonhard slowly let the words out. It seems an interesting element has just appeared. Time passed and the recruits went home. Suddenly a young man burst into the first squad's sleeping quarters and shouted, "Oh my gosh." Talking with other teammates, Demian had to turn and address Shivo's panic. What's going on that everyone's in an uproar? He quickly said that it seemed some big shot had just visited their training camp. Recalling what he'd accidentally witnessed left Shivo stunned. I heard it's a very famous trainer from the 3rd division. That man is a legend among trainers. No wonder our instructors looked like they'd lost their minds. At the mention of the title, he immediately stood up and asked the logical question. A trainer from the 3rd division, what's his name? Rubbing his hair, he tried to remember as he replied. I just heard it and then forgot. His name is. Both his body and spirit went into shock at the other's next words. Leonhard, something like that, right? In the next moment, the name corrected itself precisely in his mind. Leonhard. Sure enough, Shivo nodded as soon as he heard it. That's right, that's the name, Leonhard. Before he finished speaking, the other had already passed by, startling and puzzling him. Demian, where are you going? He ran straight down the corridor. The squad leader's stern but hurried manner left Shivo deeply curious. What's gotten into him all of a sudden? Meanwhile, he paid no attention to anything else, focusing only on the essential thought in his mind. I have to see for myself if it's really him. Unbeknownst to him, just as Demian wanted to confirm, Leonhardt had been closing the distance from the opposite direction. His presence, of course, drew attention to him. Isn't that the soldier Demian mentioned earlier? Brian cheered at the sight. Demian, I was about to come find you. Unexpectedly, he closed the distance to both of them and saluted with the utmost formality. Glory to the kingdom. Facing that salute, Leonhardt calmly asked for confirmation. Your name is Demian, correct? It's his name, so he didn't hesitate to acknowledge it. Yes, that's me. The atmosphere fell silent as he sank into thought. The 3rd Division is linked to Training Camp 3, true, but that's so far away I thought it would be ages before I'd meet him. No matter what, Demian's joy at meeting the person most important to his past life was immeasurable. Long time no see, Master, the one who had the greatest influence on my life. On the long corridor, having just seen Demian respectfully salute, Leonhardt spoke to confirm. You're Demian, right? He kept a composed exterior, but curiosity had already stirred within him. Old Reborn kept praising the kid so much that I had to see him with my own eyes. Sensing the flow of mana in the youth's body, he silently admired it. He's practicing a high-level mana technique, isn't he? He stroked his chin in thought, appraising the teenager from head to toe. Then Leonhardt unexpectedly spoke up. I watched earlier. Your martial art has real promise. Have you decided which unit you want to join after graduation? At that question, Demian fell briefly into thought. A unit to join. His lips moved a few times as if arranging his words. I don't need to fuss or worry about it for long, he declared decisively, excitement clear on his face. I intend to join the Neocallis unit. The concise answer echoed in the quiet air and instantly startled Leonhardt with surprise. Are you serious? Because compared to other organizations, Neocallis is no joke among the 3rd Division's units. Their mission is to drive back the monsters pouring out of the forest. That place is the most dangerous and harsh. People die there every year. Understanding all that made Leonhardt even more incredulous and curious at Demian's choice. Why rush into a place like that? Most people prefer the comfortable life of a royal administrative official. Isn't that better? He looked the boy square in the eyes and spoke with unwavering resolve. Because only there can I become stronger. Given that firm answer, Leonhardt couldn't help but smile with amusement. If you want, I can write a recommendation letter to get you in. The mention of knightly ranks made Brian gasp and hastily warned Trainer, that place is reserved for nobles only. Standing before a door countless people would trade everything to reach, Demian declined. I appreciate your offer, but I've already decided. My goal is clear, there's someone there I must meet. I came all the way to the 3rd Division just to find that man. Seeing the resolve in his words and choice, Leonhardt didn't press further. If it's your decision, I won't stop you. Go get some rest. Before leaving, Brian couldn't help but turn to Demian with a complaint. This kid, do you know you just passed up a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? The Knight Order normally only accepts nobles, but a trainer's recommendation changes that. He immediately turned to Leonhardt with a pleading expression, begging for a chance for the 13-year-old. Trainer, I think Demian is too young to understand what he just gave up. Let me talk some sense into him. But instead of agreeing, the trainer surprised him by speaking. Do you really think that kid chose the wrong path? While he didn't know how to respond, the trainer recalled Demian's expression when he refused. Maybe you didn't see the look in his eyes just now. At that, he couldn't help but laugh with delight at this rare teenager. Where did that kid come from? 13 years old and already truly formidable, not kidding. With that thought and a satisfied look still on his face, he warned, don't push him, let him be. As long as he's in the 3rd Division, we'll bump into each other again sooner or later. A day of rest passed and the next morning brought the match between Squad 1 and Squad 3. Demian glanced at the opposing group and reminded everyone, you saw yesterday, Squad 3 is no easy opponent. He paused to gather everyone's attention, then continued in a teasing tone. But I guarantee one thing, at this point, no squad in this training camp can give us trouble anymore. That spirited declaration immediately lifted the team's morale. Kyle exclaimed with delight, we're really strong, aren't we? After 2 previous overwhelming victories, the squad was fired up. Demian smiled with determination. Crush them, just do what we always do. As his words ended, the trainer's shout rang out across the open area. Squad 3 will advance first, the match begins. The moment the signal sounded, Demian immediately raised his hand to signal, "Form up." In just a few seconds, the whole team formed a tight defensive formation that surprised Gerard. "Isn't that the formation they used against Squad 4 yesterday?" Appel, watching closely beside him, commented. "I admit, it does look solid." Looking at the human wall Squad 1 had just built, he narrowed his eyes in calculation and emphasized each word. "Appel, you have a crucial role in this match. You know what to do, right?" Without further explanation, he simply nodded. "Yes." Under his coordination, the members of Squad 3 shifted in unison and linked together into sturdy layers. "Mount up." As the order was given, both sides instantly plunged into a brutal clash. With his brows knit, he immediately adjusted the tactic. "All of you charge." Observing that familiar control method, Gerard only slightly frowned as he was startled to realize it was the same old routine as yesterday. In that tense moment, he suddenly shouted crisply, "Appel now." As the command sounded, those on the front line immediately split to both sides, leaving a wide corridor straight through the formation. The unexpected maneuver froze Demian for a moment, his gaze locking on the gap that had opened. "What? They broke their own formation? What are they up to?" Unlike the assault that needed a springboard yesterday, this time Appel shot forward at full speed down the open path. Within a few breaths, he closed on the target and swung his staff straight at an opposing member. The move happened so fast that even Demian, who had the situation well in hand, had to pause momentarily. Seeing the plan take effect, Gerard seized the opportunity at once. Appel's punch landed. "Exploit that gap now." At that moment, Kyle, a burly figure, crouched with two shields into a ready stance. "You think I'll let you run rampant?" The assault, which had been surging with momentum, was forced to halt by him alone, throwing them into panic. "What the hell is this bastard's strength?" Behind the lines, Demian quietly exhaled in relief. Given the sudden turn of events, fortunately Kyle stopped that dangerous strike. Recalling the scene, he couldn't help but admire inwardly. "That kid Appel is really amazing." One punch sent the shield-bearer flying. Meanwhile, Appel on the other side was watching Kyle and let out a sigh. What kind of monster is he? Clearly a northerner, so why did he come to training camp 3? He quickly pushed that thought aside. There was a far more pressing issue at hand. Whatever the reason, this was getting troublesome. The muscle-bound guy had locked onto him. Suddenly, the pre-match exchange between Kyle and Demian popped into his head. "Kyle, your only job is to shadow Appel for me. If you can block him, no one will break our formation." Hearing that name, he couldn't help but be puzzled. "Who's Appel?" He smiled knowingly. "You'll recognize him at a glance." Back in the ongoing match, Kyle still stood firm before the line like a wall, smirking with self-satisfaction. "Let's see what you lot are capable of." Seeing the obstacle showed no sign of budging, Gerard stepped forward slowly and asked, "Appel, can you pierce through?" Knowing this wasn't an easy opponent, he nonetheless had no intention of retreating. "You have to, by any means necessary." Feeling the pressure from the opponent, Appel immediately reviewed the entire plan in his head to find a way to break through. Pure brute force won't take this guy down, if that's the case. He slowly closed his eyes and focused all his strength into the spear in his hands. There is only one way left. In the next instant, he suddenly shouted and leapt straight into the air, aiming for Kyle. The weapon came down with terrifying force, but Kyle still managed to raise his shield in time. The teammates behind him immediately cheered excitedly. "He blocked it, classic Kyle of ours." But they hadn't expected Appel's mouth to curl with a knowing smirk. "Fine, you like blocking, do you?" At that thought, the spear in his hand pushed forward again, channeling mana to swell its power. "Then I'll beat you until you're smashed to pieces." Gritting his teeth to take each hammer-like blow, Kyle couldn't help but be incredulous. Damn, a kid Demian's age is this insanely strong. No sooner had he finished the thought than the shield in his hands could take no more and shattered. God damn it. He pulled the spear back. Appel poured every last ounce of strength into the final strike. This ends here. With nothing left to block with, Kyle could only raise his arms in front of him and brace for the incoming blow. But just when victory and defeat hung by a thread, a figure suddenly darted in from the side. Demian appeared just in time and used the mana-shrouded shield in his hand to stop Appel's strike. When he realized who was standing in front of him, he couldn't help but exclaim the other's name, Demian. Just as a new confrontation seemed about to erupt, a signal suddenly echoed through the air. The sound made everyone stop at once and turn their attention toward its source. Standing in the field, the trainer quickly announced the result. Time, because the attackers, Squad 3, failed to seize the flag within the allotted time, Squad 3 loses. Hearing the verdict, Appel immediately clenched his fists so tight they strained with dissatisfaction. That big guy blocked all my attacks, damn it, I thought we'd finish this quickly. On the other side, Demian looked to his friend still breathing hard after the defense and asked, "Kyle, are you okay?" He replied slowly and loudly, "Of course I'm fine." Demian was silent for a beat, then made a decision. "You sit out the second round and rest." This surprised him. "Don't be ridiculous. No bones are broken. I'm fine." But to protect his teammate, Demian stuck to his word and reiterated the importance. "We still have 2 weeks of training left. If you aggravate an injury here, you won't graduate." Demian didn't stop there and quickly offered another plan. "Instead, you guard the flag in the center of the field. That's the one thing I trust you with. If the flag is lost, it's on you." Kyle fell silent for a moment, then smiled lightly, realizing Demian truly cared about him. "You want to save my face and worry about me too? Besides, aren't we the attackers this round? Why are we suddenly talking about guarding the flag?" Not wanting to prolong the back and forth, he firmly took what was given to him and assured in a steady tone, "Don't worry, I won't let anyone touch it. You go out there and smash them." After a few short beats, the trainer's voice rang out once more. "Switch sides, Squad 1, prepare to attack." Before the formation fully stabilized, Demian swept his gaze across each teammate's face and offered encouragement. "I know everyone's exhausted, but this is the final match. Come on, team. We're attackers this round, so I'm not going to stall the game." His eyes sharpened and determination showed in every feature. 5 minutes. Demian turned to face the opposing formation directly, his expression stern. Of course, it wasn't only him. Squad 3 was also filled with fighting spirit. Then his voice rang out across the wide space again in a teasing tone. "We'll grab their flag and seal the victory within 5 minutes." Before the match officially began, Squad 1 and Squad 3 stood facing each other with spirits running high. Surveying the enemy formation, Demian quietly tightened his resolve. Finally, it's the final match of the tournament. The battles he'd fought and the times he'd led his teammates through hardship flashed through his mind. "I've already done everything expected of a student squad leader. Now it's time to make those trainers remember this name." Thinking that, a slow, excited smile curved his lips. The name Demian. He kept his gaze forward, his fighting spirit flared ever stronger. "If we beat Squad 3 with that Appel, the Rookie of the Year spot is basically guaranteed." Among the enemy ranks, Appel's figure quickly came into view. It looked like he intended to guard the flag himself. After using so much energy, putting him on the front line to command would be cruel. Although it pained him, this had been decided since the match began. This was bound to turn into a direct clash. The atmosphere on the field snapped taut as the announcement echoed around. Squad 1 attacks, Squad 3 defends, the inter-squad final begins. As soon as the order ended, Demian turned to his team and shouted, "Floor it from the start, everyone focus and charge after me." A unified cry answered, "Roger." Immediately, the entire Squad 1 moved in the prearranged formation and surged toward the enemy lines, leaving onlookers stunned. What the hell? How are they moving so fast, running at that speed, and the formation doesn't shift an inch? The more he watched, the more Gerard felt the pressure the enemy exerted. Squad 1 with Demian at the lead is no joke. The thought barely formed before he issued a command: "Raise shields, watch for their squad leader." But the instant the order was passed down, Demian stepped out of formation with lightning speed. It was useless. Mana in his body surged into the arm gripping the spear. At the moment the distance between them shrank to the limit, he struck decisively. This one thrust will pierce through. The defensive line set up to stop the initial assault trembled violently. The enemy's front rank cried out, "The shield's been pierced." Faced with Demian's overwhelming power, Squad 3's key defensive point practically collapsed in an instant. Having achieved his aim, he immediately shouted to alert the teammates behind him, breach the line. Seeing the terrifying scene unfold in a flash, Gerard barked orders, "No, stop them now." Commands were relayed in succession with desperate determination to stop them. "We must bring them down," at that moment. As the encirclement was about to close, Demian's pupils suddenly flared with resolve. Just as the coordinated strikes converged, his body shot out of its original position by using his body with agile precision. So at the moment the enemy's sticks hit the ground together, the target was no longer there. His figure weaved continuously through gaps in the enemy ranks, forcing many Squad 3 members to stagger and fall. "My ankle." While never stopping his movement, Demian still turned to shout to the rear, "Squad 1, reform the line." Kyle and the remaining members immediately accelerated to deal with the panicked rookies. "They've come this far." Seeing the scene, Gerard's face went through stages of tightening in disbelief. Impossible, how could they have gotten through so fast? Appel, standing to one side, quickly concluded that the kid was the biggest threat. His brows tightened as he assessed the situation. "As long as we lock Demian down, they won't lay a hand on the flag." Saying that, he handed the flag to his captain and instructed, "Let me hold that guy off. Make sure you guard the flag carefully." An involuntary call escaped his lips. "Appel." Watching the back about to step into the line, Gerard felt a swirl of mixed emotions. He never thought he'd have to rely on this kid in a situation like this. Seeing Appel slowly approach through the dust, Demian judged that the decisive clash had finally come. The image unintentionally summoned memories from his past life, the future great General Appel. While Demian was still reminiscing, Appel suddenly shot up into the air and appeared right above him. Faced with the abrupt assault, he kept his composure. If he wanted to test his level against someone like him, this was the chance. While leaning aside to avoid the descending strike, his mind kept working without rest. The first move was just a feint. Realizing the opponent's intent, a thrill slowly curved Demian's lips. If that's the case. His vision stayed locked on every shift in Appel's assault as the next attack was quickly set up. This one would be the real deal. He immediately raised his weapon to meet the downward strike, generating a fierce shock between the two differing mana streams. The carefully calculated blow was precisely nullified, leaving Appel surprised. However, he quickly adjusted his rhythm and retreated a step. Meanwhile, Demian's hand tightened on the shaft, channeling mana steadily inward. "Give it your all, Appel." His fighting spirit rose ever higher. "The gap between them vanished in an instant because I'm going to unleash everything to take you down." When the powerful technique struck, Appel managed to prop his weapon up in time to block. Of course, Demian wouldn't give up there. He decisively raised the pole in his hand once more. Then another brutal blow fell. The force transmitted through the weapon made Appel's expression waver. The mana was strong enough to nearly snap the spear. Continuously fending off the relentless assaults, Appel grew increasingly bewildered. "Is this guy really a civilian? Don't tell me he's like me." His doubts swelled as the wildcard Demian proved able to manipulate mana with such mastery. Facing that surging energy, Appel couldn't help but force a smile inwardly. Who would have thought that in this tiny training camp they'd hit such an imposing wall? After a round of exchanges, Demian suddenly retracted his stance and said calmly, "Shall we end this match, Appel?" He immediately released all the force he'd been gathering into a shockwave and lunged forward. This strike he certainly couldn't block. The spearhead sliced through the air, shattered the weapon blocking his chest in an instant, and struck Appel without hesitation. The heavy impact sent him flying, and he tumbled across the ground for several rolls. Pushing himself up, Appel winced as pain rippled through his body. Seizing the moment when his opponent could no longer stop him, Demian bypassed him and accelerated toward the objective. Those behind could only watch helplessly, unable to do anything. Damn it, the flag. His vision blurred, but he still strained toward his team's emblem. In a flash, Demian seized the flag and raised it high above his head as the trainer's voice rang out, "Squad 1 wins." Seeing that, Appel could only grit his teeth and accept the outcome. With the flag in hand, Demian quickly stepped up to the person who had given him a real fight. then reached out to pull his opponent to his feet and praised him. "Great match, Appel," he nodded in reply. "Congratulations, but next time I won't lose." At that determined declaration, Demian broke into a bright smile at the suggestion. "Then next time let's be on the same team. I don't think I have it in me to beat you a second time." Faced with his sunlit grin, Appel felt no annoyance at all. Once steady on his feet, he lightly punched Demian's chest and replied, "Cut the modesty." Inside, Demian was thrilled, thinking of the future. "I actually defeated Appel Vanstrel. Maybe this experience will accidentally turn him into an even more terrifying monster." Quickly brushing that aside, Demian turned to his teammates who were cheering nonstop. "That can wait. Right now it's time to enjoy the victory with the brothers." Meanwhile, not far from the field, the trainer who had witnessed everything calmly concluded that matters had closed with Squad 1's victory and that the remaining 2 weeks of training must proceed smoothly as well. Hearing this, Leonhardt behind him merely smiled in agreement. Indeed, for now. His gaze chose the moment to savor the cheers from Demian's team. Let the kids taste the sweetness of victory first. Kyle stood steady before a table laden with tempting food. "What is this? Is this for real?" He couldn't hide his excitement mixed with hunger and shouted, "They serve steak right here at the training camp. Winning the squad tournament really pays off." Watching his teammates devour piece after piece of meat, Demian whispered in amazement, "They just exhausted themselves and still look so lively. Well, not every day do you get to eat until you're stuffed." He scanned around looking for someone. "Master looks like he's gone. What a shame. I still wanted to talk with him a bit more." Suddenly Reborn appeared, wanting to join. "Mind if I sit here with you?" A student immediately stood and hurriedly offered the seat. "Coach, of course, please sit." He sat down beside him, curiosity apparent. "Demian, are you still keeping the decision from yesterday? I mean Coach Leonhardt's offer." He gave a mild response. "Yes, that's right, sir." Hearing that, Reborn could only smile helplessly. What a pity, such a rare opportunity. He then glanced and probed. "But did you know about this?" Demian asked curiously. "Know what, sir?" Reborn recounted a recent event. Coach Leonhardt also extended an invitation to join the Knights to Appel as well. Guess what his answer was? Calmly, Demian replied, "Whatever he chooses, I'll respect it. Appel's life is his own decision." He couldn't help but laugh at that answer. "You're a boring kid, you know that." Reborn watched the other for a few more seconds and thought to himself, "I came here to advise you against joining the Knights, but it seems nothing I say will move you. If that's the case." He stood up and raised his glass, his voice full of goodwill. "Everyone listen up, you've all worked hard these past 2 weeks. I wish you all the best. Tomorrow we return to training. Prepare yourselves. The coach hopes you'll train with all your might to achieve your personal goals." Everyone cheerfully raised their glasses in unison. Glory to the kingdom. Time flew, and before long they had entered the 3rd week of training, the final week. The coach folded his arms across his chest and bellowed encouragement. "Thrust harder, come on, faster." Demian scanned the area, a satisfied curl at his lips as he realized the rookie's attitudes had clearly changed. And it wasn't just his squad. This entire 3rd training camp was shifting in a more positive direction. It seems the recent squad tournament was an enormous lever. The coach's voice boomed. "Attention everyone, 5-minute break." Kyle, panting, came over to ask Demian, "Have you heard anything?" Demian turned, puzzled. "Heard what?" Relying on what he'd picked up, he reported, "I heard Squad 4's morale has been awful since that tournament, their dropout rates skyrocketing." Kyle burst into delighted laughter, especially their squad leader. "After that flop he ran off sharpish." Demian sneered, "Truly humiliating." Suddenly he turned and dropped a question. "But Kyle, you know what's most important right now, right?" Demian faced them seriously and reminded them, "Sure, we gained a bunch of collective points by winning the squad tournament, but if you want a good spot later, you need to take care of your personal score. Who here doesn't dream of stepping into the royal palace, the most lucrative job any ordinary rookie drools over, a palace administrative soldier? But out of the 160 people here, only 30 can even apply to the palace. Even then, the internal competition is fierce. Only 1/3 of applicants actually get accepted." Kyle at first still jeered, but the tension showed. Demian glanced back and stated a fact. After all, everyone who enlisted here did it for that goal. Sensing something off, he shook his friend's shoulder hard and demanded, "Wait, don't tell me you're aiming for that palace administrative post too." He sighed and explained wryly, "I have no intention of going to the palace." But Kyle wouldn't let it go. "Why not? Do you want that palace administrative job that badly?" Demian composed himself to point out the harsh truth of prestige. "Do you know if you're accepted, you'll be stuck inside that palace all day?" Kyle paused for a few seconds. "I know. It does sound a bit stifling, but it's still the best spot. Not taking it would be a waste." He brushed his sleeve and bluntly exposed the truth. "Give it up. Someone like you would bolt in less than a month. You're the type who likes action and showing off. Sitting still there would bore you to death." Kyle couldn't argue but remained curious. "So where exactly do you plan to go?" Demian looked up with determined eyes and declared, "I'll join Neocalis." The single name dropped caused everyone to blanch. He was so shocked his face contorted as he shouted, "Neocalis? You mean that place I'm thinking of? Demian's gone mad." He immediately got kicked in the shin by Demian. "Shut your mouth," the old man. Kyle, wincing and clutching his leg, burst into laughter. "Demian, exactly what I expected." Demian was a bit surprised at the reaction. "What do you mean?" He looked up delighted and shouted, "You're truly a certified madman, and the organized, daredevil kind at that. But that's exactly why I enjoy hanging out with you." Just then the coach loudly reminded them, "Break is over, everyone gather and continue training." Kyle quickly stood, urging as he went, "Back to training, one heavyweight contender for the administrative post just left, which makes things easier for us." After the practice, Maris stepped onto the podium to speak. "You've all worked hard over the past month." Demian listened in silence yet felt deeply moved inwardly. "I can't believe the training's already over. It's as if we only enlisted yesterday." He looked down at the trainees and smiled encouragingly. "I will cheer for your future efforts. After you leave this training camp, keep fighting and moving forward so you can contribute to the kingdom." Suddenly Reborn glanced at him and whispered a reminder, "Demian." He understood immediately, stood at attention, and shouted loudly to marshal the company. "Attention all, stand at ease, hail the company captain, glory to the kingdom." Then it was his turn to announce, "That is all, this closing ceremony of the training course is concluded. I will now announce the 5 outstanding recruits of the class." Reborn began revealing the first name, platoon leader of Platoon 1, Demian. He congratulated him warmly. "Congratulations." His eyes lit up and he replied quickly, "Yes." His mind rejoiced as if he'd climbed 9 levels of heaven. "Yes, I did it." Reborn continued with the second name. "Next is Appel from Platoon 3. He stepped forward and responded, "Present, sir." Then familiar names were called. Kyle of Platoon 1, Platoon 3 leader Gerard, Platoon 2 leader Alex. He finished the announcement and proposed, "The 5 of you, come with me. As a reward, each of you may choose one piece of equipment from the armory." They all filed up to a large door. Reborn explained how the rewards worked. "You may take anything inside. We'll start with the highest scorer. Demian, you go first." He entered eagerly. "Yes, sir." His heart celebrated. "This is the moment I've been waiting for." Demian glanced around the space and remarked, "The inside is arranged pretty neatly, isn't it?" He casually picked up a few items to inspect. "Is this a mana potion? I wonder if there's any hidden treasure in this storehouse I don't know about." He quickly put them back and told himself to focus. "Looks like not. I'll just take what I need and get out fast." Exactly as he'd heard described. Since he stepped in, his eyes hadn't left it. Demian reached out and took something. "Found you." It turned out to be a ring, the item the subordinate from Training Camp 3 had hinted about. A ring that can briefly activate an invisibility enchantment when mana is channeled into it. Having secured what he wanted, Demian quickly left. The other recruits surely won't pay any attention to this ring, who here even knows how to use mana. As he passed by Appel, his mind changed. Except for one person, him. Reborn announced outside. "Next is Appel, you may enter." He stepped straight in. "Yes, sir." He stood outside waiting silently. "But in my past life, it was Appel who took this ring, right? He must have used mana to sense the ring's special nature." Demian's gaze grew more serious. Now I'm curious what he'll bring out in exchange. When he saw the other come out so quickly, he was surprised. He came out much faster than I expected. Had he already decided beforehand what he would choose? Kyle beside him saw he was dazed and asked, "Hey Demian, is something wrong?" Demian quickly shook his head to deny it. "No, nothing at all." But he had memorized everything silently. There's no doubt about it. The seal Appel just took out. It bears the coat of arms of a kingdom long since fallen. I've always wondered how he learned to use mana at such a young age. A thought flashed. Don't tell me Appel has close ties to that ancient kingdom. Reborn locked the large door and asked, "All right, does everyone have an item with them?" He rubbed his chin, pondering Appel's choice. "Appel, do you know what this is?" Appel calmly explained, "I just felt a divine force from it, so I brought it." Reborn smiled in satisfaction at his answer and added information. "A divine force, huh? That makes sense. This is a seal imbued with power to ward off evil and calamity." He looked at the two beside them in admiration. "You brought a spear, impressive, and that shield was crafted by the artisan Walter." Finally his gaze stopped on him and Reborn hesitated a bit. "And Demian, are you sure about that choice? That ring only helps reduce your body weight a little." He heard this and asked in surprise, "Reduce body weight?" He was slightly taken aback and offered, "You chose it without knowing, let me try it on." But Demian had already quickly slipped it onto his own finger. Then he tested some movements in place, eyebrows rising in surprise. "It seems it makes me much lighter than I imagined. With this I can move far faster on the battlefield." Reborn stepped forward and asked seriously, "Are you satisfied?" Demian nodded firmly and explained, "Yes, it's actually much better than I thought." Yet inwardly he was ecstatic. Invisibility plus weight reduction, this ring was truly an A-rank relic. Seeing everyone pleased, Reborn announced the next procedure. "Now everyone return. You must also submit your unit preference forms." Back in the room, Reborn handed out the forms and instructed, "You fill it out too, Demian." He remained steadfast in choosing the Neokali's unit. He glanced around and couldn't help sighing inwardly, feeling increasingly regretful. If Demian joined the Knights, he'd surely go far. Demian set down his pen and handed the preference form back. "I'm done writing." Reborn reached out to take it. "All right." He remained concerned and warned more carefully, "Of course I know you can handle yourself, but that place is extremely dangerous, so be careful." Hearing this, Demian nodded and replied, "Yes, sir, thank you for your concern." Reborn finally exhaled and announced, "You've worked hard this month. You'll receive notice in a few days and can depart." Demian bowed again to express, "Thank you for everything, trainer." He pushed the door and left the room after everything was finished. Demian looked back at the familiar space he'd grown attached to. "At last I'm almost there. I don't know why I feel both happy and sad." Suddenly a voice echoed down the hallway, "Demian?" He was a bit surprised to be sought out. "Appel." Appel strode up, blazing with anger. "I heard from the trainer." Appel angrily demanded loudly, "Why aren't you joining the Knights? With your skills you're more than qualified." Demian shook his head to state his view. "That place isn't for me." He bit his lower lip to hold back his emotions and lowered his voice to say, "I'm going to join the Knights. I received a letter of recommendation from trainer Leonhardt." Already knowing this, he just smiled encouragingly. "A wise choice, you'll certainly do well." That only made Appel more annoyed but helpless. "You call that wise while you yourself refuse it? You really have no clue, Demian." He looked up solemnly and warned, "That Neokali's unit you signed up for, I've heard it's terribly dangerous. Take care of yourself." They gripped each other's hands firmly and spiritedly. Appel smiled and promised, "We'll definitely meet again, Demian." He curved the corner of his mouth slightly and said, "Thank you." Watching Appel's figure recede, he wondered inwardly whether the other knew that in the distant future he would become a great general of the Baroque kingdom. Maybe he'll even become stronger than monsters. In any case, I'm really looking forward to Appel's future. Demian spun around with rare excitement. "Well then, I'll go say goodbye to the others now." When he returned to the room, everyone had already packed up their clothes and belongings. Kyle saw him and ran up, calling out loudly, "Demian." He laughed and teased, "We thought you'd leave without even saying goodbye." Hearing that, Demian sighed and expressed, "When leaving you have to say goodbye, who knows when we'll meet again." Suddenly Kyle smiled and dropped a cryptic line, "You'll see me again sooner than you think." Then he turned to everyone and loudly announced, "All right, our captain wants to give a final farewell, so attention everyone, come watch." Demian raised his head with eyes full of joy and spoke sincerely, "You've all worked hard, thank you for following me, do your best in your new units." Everyone responded in unison, "Thank you for everything, Demian, see you soon." He nodded contentedly and said, "Wishing you all the best." A while later, Demian took off his uniform and put on ordinary clothes. At that moment, a soft voice nearby called, "Demian." He paused for a beat, then turned to look. She smiled brightly and greeted, "Long time no see, Demian. I'm Dial from the Hamel Trade Guild, pleased to meet you." Cut to a building in town. Dial had prepared what he needed. "First, here are the detailed documents on how to use your investment." She presented everything seriously. "Based on your conditions, we estimate a return of 3% of net revenue." Demian examined each page with surprise and satisfaction. "Not bad, didn't expect she'd plan the use of my investment so neatly." Dial smiled professionally. "If you have any questions, feel free to ask." He set the documents down and concluded, "After reading this, I have no further questions. Proceed like this, and shortly an agent will bring the insurance money in my name over." She collected the documents and was about to move to the next procedure. "Understood. What about the detailed contract?" Suddenly Demian waved his hand to refuse. "That's unnecessary. A contract is only needed if a dispute arises between the parties. I trust you'll handle everything well." That sudden trust also surprised Dial. "You really are a very special person." He placed a small chest on the table and said, "Please inspect it. This is the promised investment." The moment it opened, she couldn't hide her astonishment. "Demian." The moment it opened, she couldn't hide her shock. "Demian." Dial had expected the promised investment to be 300 gold coins, but this looked like over 500 gold. Demian snapped his fingers and explained, "It's a small token of my appreciation for your hard work." She still couldn't compose herself and was about to adjust a few things. "Then I have to revise the investment amount in the contract." But he stopped her. "It's fine." She had been pleased from the start and easily dismissed him because of his youth and appearance. Still, the documents she prepared for him as a real investor were quite impressive. Dial grew curious about his plans. "You just graduated from training, right? That means you're about to move to your assigned unit. Where are you going?" He replied calmly and honestly, "I'm heading west. I signed up for the Neocallis unit near the Bronzerian forest." She went from one shock to another. "What? The Neocallis unit? Don't tell me you volunteered for that." Demian shrugged with some pride. "Do you think the top trainee of the class was forced to go there?" Demian's lip curled as he teased, "What's the matter? If I get killed, that investment will end up belonging to the Hamel Trade Guild anyway." Unexpectedly, Dial responded seriously, "Please don't say things like that. I don't like that kind of joke." He raised an eyebrow in silent admiration. "I thought she was a gentle woman, but at times like this she's razor sharp." She regained her cordiality and asked, "When will you depart?" Demian answered truthfully, "In 3 days." Dial then stood and made a credible promise. "Understood. I will use the investment you entrusted to me as efficiently as possible." When he saw her leave, he let out a relieved breath. Investment business is settled. Demian, full of excitement, resolved to enjoy himself. "All right, in 3 days I'll be stuck in that scary forest. From now until then I have to eat some good food." So he dashed into a tavern and downed several mugs of beer with gusto. Then Demian swung by a grill stall and bought skewer after skewer, devouring them. When he grew sleepy, he just lay down in the street and slept off his drunkenness. On the day of departure, Demian held the map and muttered to himself, "I guess it's about time I set out." He glanced back to check his supplies. "I've gathered almost everything I need, now it's just time to go." But then a strange sensation pressed against his back, making him shiver. Why all of a sudden? When he turned, he was stunned to see Kyle. "Why are you here?" Kyle laughed loudly. "Didn't I tell you we'd meet again soon?" Demian squinted probingly. Kyle, don't tell me you. Suddenly Kyle called out directly, Demian. He declared confidently and energetically, you really think our relationship stops at being classmates in the training camp? I've signed up for the Neocallis Unit 2. Demian, let's both do our best there, okay? Kyle came up, slung an arm around Demian's shoulders and urged, let's go, shall we? As the two were about to leave, a voice rang out to stop them. Wait a moment. This made Kyle startle and look up. What is it? Dial stepped forward shyly and said, good thing it's not too late. Kyle gaped at the girl and asked, what wind blew you here? Demian, curious, asked too, what's with all this gear? She explained, I heard the Neocallis unit is stationed very far away, so I prepared this carriage for your journey. Inside are some long-lasting snacks and a few necessities you might need. Demian grew even more puzzled and asked, but why did you do this? Recalling his earlier expression and words, she affirmed, to repay the favor you did me. It's also my way of returning the sincerity you showed me. Demian, our guild always believes in reciprocity, so I spent the last 2 days gathering all this. She cautioned, safe travels to both of you. The gift pile delighted Kyle, who praised, she's really generous. Dial scratched her head at the compliment. Demian smiled and said, consider this an investment since you told me to invest more later. Startled, Dial asked, what did you say? He laughed until his sides hurt, thinking to himself, she's terrible at lying, but she's more interesting than I thought. He then walked away, not forgetting to leave a parting line. All right, see you later, Dial bowed in reply. Yes, goodbye, Demian. The two men climbed into the carriage and set off together. Dial stood behind and watched the carriage fade into the distance until it disappeared. Kyle and Demian's journey lasted several days. Eventually, they could see a town far off. Kyle, bouncing in the carriage, complained aloud, damn, why is this road so gut-shaking? Demian remarked, walking would have left our limbs numb. He pointed outside and announced, anyway, I can see the Urkel Defense Force, so we've reached Urkel. Kyle wondered aloud, nodding there weren't any townspeople around. Demian leaned his arms on the wall behind him and explained, probably because of the monsters or there in the Bronzerian forest. Most residents of Urkel make a living by going into the Bronzerian forest to harvest an herb called amancho. Amancho is poisonous, causing high fever and diarrhea, but if properly processed, it becomes the main ingredient for a highly effective analgesic. Since 60% of the kingdom's amancho comes from the Bronzerian forest, no matter how dangerous it is, the villagers can't give up the trade. After disembarking, Demian urged eagerly, let's get to the base, come on. The two entered Urkel, where the streets were eerily empty. Kyle frowned and said, hey Demian, don't tell me. He pointed ahead and asked, that building there, are you sure anyone could live in that? It looks like it'd collapse if you even touched it. Meanwhile, Demian keenly detected the scent of blood nearby. When no one answered, Kyle called out in puzzlement, Demian, he warned, someone's coming. From a distance, a fairly large group of people approached them. The group didn't seem especially strong, some were wounded and had to be supported by others to walk. On the shoulder shields of all of them was engraved the emblem and the word Neo. As the group passed Demian, one young man shot an unfriendly glance his way. Then the group disappeared behind a dark door. Kyle looked at them and exclaimed, good lord, look at their faces like wandering ghosts. Demian could only sigh and remind him, you need to get used to it, Kyle. This is a place where people go to risk their lives every day. He wondered silently why, of all times, that memory had come back to him now. Recalling the past, Demian once stood before a troop and asked, in your opinion, what is the most important duty of a soldier? They enthusiastically answered from their perspectives, absolutely obeying orders, right? Isn't it about eliminating the enemy most effectively, teacher? Even if I die, I'll drag 20 of them down with me. Demian frowned slightly, showing his disagreement with those views. Then he smacked a soldier on the head hard enough to stun him, who complained, why are you bonking only me? Demian answered, because your answer is the worst. Listen closely, the correct answer is do not die. He insisted, you must not die, never underestimate your own life. At all costs you must survive and return. We are required to grow stronger so we don't lose our lives, got it? Back in the present, Demian sighed inwardly, thinking he still remembered the expressions on those men's faces when he said that, even though in the end they all died. Then he told his companion, let's go inside too, Kyle. Kyle, confused, asked back, right now. Demian turned and asked, have you forgotten why we're here? We're here to become stronger. Standing around dazed is just a waste of time. Kyle replied worriedly, hey Demian, you saw their faces earlier. The atmosphere inside is probably awful. Maybe we should wait a bit. But no matter what he said, Demian kept walking toward the dark doorway, leaving Kyle helpless. He ran after him in fear, shouting, Demian, wait. At the Neocalli's unit, Victor angrily threw his sword into a crate and cursed, damn it, those bastards in the defense force. They said there were only a few orcs, but there were over 30, and they even brought along an old orc mage. Russell reported with concern, Sergeant Carissa's arm is hanging, almost torn off. If not treated immediately, he'll be forced to be discharged. For members of the Neocalli's unit who were sent here as punishment, there is no such choice as discharge. One option is to rot away in prison for the rest of your life. The other is to struggle in this living hell, or be worked to exhaustion at Neocalli's and then discarded like a rag. Victor, choked with indignation, shouted, damn it, discharge my ass. If you're disabled and kicked out, what are you supposed to eat dirt? Terran, the Neocalli's captain, was calmer and offered a solution. First call a doctor, then try to invite a cleric from the temple. Fabian asked, Captain, do you know how much those zealots charge? Our wages barely cover anything. Terran pulled out his coin pouch and bluntly said, it's 20 gold coins, pitch in. Seeing that, Victor angrily shouted, Captain, isn't that money supposed to be saved for your mother's surgery? He forced a smile and replied, she's a bit better now. The physicians say she doesn't need emergency surgery. The other soldiers exchanged looks, each understanding how much the captain had sacrificed for their unit. Everyone then banded together to contribute. Damn it, count mine in two, me too. Dianel stammered forward and whispered, I want to contribute too. Victor angrily shouted, hey. Since when does the newest kid get to start contributing? Take that money and buy yourself a new pair of boots to replace those ragged ones, kid. The boy trembled, his voice pleading, please let me contribute. Sergeant Carissa was badly wounded, saving me. Victor, seeing this, muttered a choked curse, damn, what a good kid. Terran then ordered a soldier, this will take some time, so go fetch a cleric at the temple first. The soldier quickly ran out, answering, yes, sir. Terran turned to another and asked, Dianel, how old are you this year? He answered, I'm 18, sir. Terran put his hand on the comrade's shoulder and praised, time flies, our youngest has been enlisted for a year already. Now we just need Carissa to hold on. Suddenly someone called from behind him, Captain. Reporting in, the new recruits we were notified about earlier have arrived. Everyone exchanged skeptical looks. Terran replied, new recruits, the fighting was so intense I completely forgot. He called loudly, Dianel. The man answered, here, sir. Terran put a hand on the youngest's shoulder and announced, let's go. It's time to go fetch your juniors. In the office, Terran looked at the two newcomers and asked, are you the new recruits this intake? They answered in unison, yes. He mentally assessed them, that kid over there looks capable, his muscles and strength seem decent. When he looked at Demian, Terran hesitated a little. He asked aloud, you're really only 13? The boy nodded and replied, yes, sir. Terran thought to himself, even younger than Dianel, our youngest by 5 years. Why would such a child volunteer to enlist here? He helplessly set the paper down and muttered, they must be courting death. I don't understand what kids these days are thinking. Kyle pointed at Demian and asserted, but he was valedictorian of the training class. Terran, surprised, asked, valedictorian? He warned gently, so what? The training camp and this place are two completely different worlds. Demian replied, I know. The boy's nonchalant expression startled him and he asked again, you know, and you still came here. He then called out loudly, Dianel. The man answered, here. Terran pointed at the two newcomers and ordered, you two, take them to claim their bunks and have them clean up. Dianel replied, understood, sir. He glanced at the two and announced, follow me. Demian and Kyle walked behind Dianel down the barracks corridor. He slowly explained everything. There are no ranks here in Neo-Collies. Forget titles like squad leader or company commander. The man earlier is the unit commander, and the one beside him is the deputy commander. Under them, whoever arrived first is the senior. Order is extremely strict. Entering the sleeping quarters, Dianel announced, "Pick whichever bed you like, though you won't be sleeping there for long anyway." Kyle asked in confusion, "What do you mean?" Dianel answered, "I've been here a year and I'm still the newest." "Do you understand what that means?" Kyle replied, "How should I know?" No sooner had he finished than Dianel delivered a heavy kick to Kyle's leg. Kyle cried out in pain, bent over clutching his leg and growled. Dianel looked at the two newcomers with eyes full of hatred mixed with pain and said, "It means." He snarled, "Those who come after me are all dead men." That sentence left Demian and Kyle momentarily stunned and speechless. Dianel then turned and left the room, reminding them, "Unload your gear and sweep the barracks first. When you're done, I'll explain the rest." Kyle sat down on the bed quietly, while Demian turned to carefully inspect the room. Kyle swore angrily, "What kind of jerk talks like that? I don't know." Seeing Demian showing no sign of anger, he asked, "Why are you laughing then?" The boy replied casually, "Just felt like laughing." Demian thought to himself, "Looks like he really hasn't changed at all." Then he loudly reminded, "Get to cleaning." Kyle asked, "Are you serious?" Demian grabbed the cloth and replied, "If we're going to do it anyway, do it properly. This is our first task, isn't it?" Demian teased, "Clean it until it's lickable." That made Kyle snap angrily, "Do I look like a janitor to you?" A while later in the Neo-Collies mess hall, Dianel sat silently in a corner thinking, "I'm scared. Every time a new comrade joins and I end up liking and getting close to them. I remember back then when I was friendly and chatted with the newcomers. This is your first assignment today, right? Keep your eyes open. Today's job is light, so stay in the back. A single minute of negligence is enough to cost your life." Neo-Collies is exactly that kind of place. Because at some point I stopped watching over the new recruits. Then sooner or later they'll die as time passes. But these new kids, for some reason, occupy my mind, especially that boy. His eyes look as if he already knows me. While lost in thought, Kadif announced, "Dianel, I've finished repairing the soles of your boots." He took the boots and replied, "Thank you, sir." The man accepted the money and chatted, "Hey, earlier I saw some dazed kids standing at the gate. Are those new recruits?" Dianel answered, "You saw them." Kadif asked, "They looked so fresh-faced I thought they were from the defense force, but they're your juniors." He dared not answer and only bowed his head slightly. "I'll drop by again next time." As he walked, Dianel thought, "Juniors, ridiculous. Back to the barracks, I need to crush their arrogance." Seeing the unit gate ahead, Dianel told himself, "Enthusiasm, confidence, pride, those things will only get you killed here. They probably didn't just half-ass the cleaning right." The moment he stepped through the door, what he saw made him gasp in shock. Demian, face smudged with mud, turned and greeted, "You're back." Everything in the room was blindingly clean, and he called out, "Private Dianel." Two others came up and patted Dianel on the shoulder, saying, "We were startled too. Dianel, how badly did you mess with the new kids?" He stammered in fear, "I didn't do anything, sir." Demian then carried a basin of water over and reported, "We finished the cleaning as ordered. Please check if there's anywhere left that's not right." Seeing the spotless room without a speck of dust, Dianel felt uneasy and worried. Usually when told to clean they just go through the motions. How is it this spotless, or is this? He wondered, is this some kind of subtle warning? Terran stood behind him and laughed loudly, very pleased. He praised, "These new recruits are amazing. This looks like a newly built barracks." Terran's expression made the other soldiers uneasy. The commander is smiling, the man known for having no emotion. Terran then called seriously, "New recruits, come here and take a look." He asked again, "Did you two personally clean all this?" Both answered in unison, "Yes." He continued, curious, "Why clean it so thoroughly? A little passive resistance would have sufficed." Demian replied seriously, "Those were the orders of our senior, Dianel. We only executed them seriously because they were orders from our predecessor." Terran heard this and looked deep into the young soldier's eyes, thinking, having spent years rolling around on the battlefield where the line between life and death is thin, I only need a glance to know a person's capability. That big kid over there just needs a bit of training and can be thrown into battle right away, but I can't see through this kid at all. Why would a valedictorian of the training camp dive headfirst into this misery? There must be some hidden reason why he volunteered to come here, but before clarifying that, Terran ordered, "Attention, everyone, listen carefully." Everyone looked over curiously, not knowing what the order would be this time. But contrary to the serious tone of his words, Terran smiled and announced, "From today on, these two are the little brothers of our unit. Welcome them." Demian and Kyle looked at each other and smiled happily. This was the result they deserved for their serious and dedicated attitude. Diana lay on the wooden plank with Demian. He asked, "Demian, when do you think this war will end? Will it ever end?" Hearing that, he fell silent, his gaze sinking as he answered indifferently, "When they surrender, the war ends." Suddenly, Diana closed his eyes, his voice becoming resolute. "Demian, you absolutely must not die before me." Demian turned to look at him with a scrutinizing gaze. "Did you eat something spoiled? Why are you suddenly talking so sentimental?" Diana laughed it off and replied, "I just wanted to say it. Promise me, okay?" End of flashback. Demian sighed with longing, thinking to himself, "Back then I didn't bother answering him, but come to think of it, I still kept that promise." He remembered the memory of standing before Diana's corpse. Demian's eyes were full of bloodshot anger. He charged onto the battlefield alone, slashing through dozens of enemy soldiers, because in the end, I lived longer than that guy. Demian's eyes were filled with sadness when remembering that image. Damn it. He sat up, covering his forehead, thinking, "I can't fall back asleep anyway. I might as well practice the mana accumulation method." Then Demian quickly changed into his training clothes and stepped outside. After venturing deep into the forest, he saw someone lurking and training. Demian suspiciously asked himself, "Who's training at this hour?" Diana's silhouette was practicing swordplay under the soft moonlight. "It's Diana." He stood to one side, observing carefully without making a sound. He marveled inwardly. Even in my past life, he was a training maniac. But looking at him leaning on his sword, panting like an ox, Demian wondered, why does he use his sword like that? That fighting style completely clashes with his greatest strength, which is speed. Demian sighed helplessly, thinking to himself, "Ah, right. In my past life, it took so much effort to convince him to change weapons. If I jump in and tell him now, he'll probably punch me, although he wouldn't even be able to touch me." He turned away and silently left without disturbing Diana, who was training hard. "Forget it. It was hard enough to gain some goodwill. Don't let it go to waste too early. There will definitely be a suitable opportunity to talk later." The scene shifts to the next morning. Everyone gathered under the massive mountains. Everyone looked around and exclaimed to each other, "Oh my God, I've seen this training ground so many times and it's still terrifying. It looks like we're going to be worked to the bone on physical training today." Varen turned to the soldiers nearby and started making bets. "Waiting for the captain is boring. How about a bet, guys? Bet on whether those two recruits will last until the end of today's training." The whole group heard that and clamored along, betting. "I bid 10 silvers that they won't even finish the morning session. I bet 20 silvers they'll pass out as soon as the morning shift ends. Count me in." Kyle and Demian took everything in at a glance. He muttered irritably, "What are those guys doing? Are they making bets on us? Don't look down on us so much." He watched them happily wagering with each other, thinking they must be used to this since no one stepped in to stop them. The atmosphere in this unit really is. Demian suddenly turned and strode forward. Kyle followed, puzzled, asking Demian, "Where are you going?" Unexpectedly, he approached the men splitting the pot and asked, halting the group, "Can I join in? Looks like fun." They were startled. Varen scoffed loudly, "You nearly gave me a heart attack." The others joined in mocking. The star of the show brought himself along. Do the new recruits even have money? Demian's face remained utterly calm, as if it were normal. "Of course, but I'd like to change the betting terms a bit." He looked supremely confident and produced a gleaming gold coin. I bet that in today's training I will surpass everyone here, even my teammates' squad, to claim the top spot. I'm putting down 1 gold. Their faces darkened as they stared at Demian. He put a hand on his hip and asked confidently, "Any other conditions you want to add?" The corners of their mouths curled into sly smiles. They burst into derisive laughter. This new kid sure is eager to fight. One of them pointed at the coin and said, "Fine, if you win, take all this money." Varen, excited, clenched his fist and set the condition. "If you lose, you wash all our clothes for a month." Someone sneered, "If you're not confident, bow out now, kid." Demian remained utterly composed and continued, "Since I'm staking a whole gold and the laundry bets on the table, I have one more condition of my own." Varen, intrigued, asked, "Another condition? What is it? Say it." Demian's expression grew serious and he said softly, "If I win, grant me complete exemption from regular training hours for a month." They were stunned at the unexpected demand. "What? Exempt from training? That's absurd." Suddenly Terran appeared and agreed. "All right, let's do it." The others turned in shock. "Captain." He called loudly toward Dianel standing across the way. "Dianel," Dianel, puzzled, replied, "Yes, sir." Terran smiled and pointed at the ringleaders. "You join this bet too." Dianel stepped forward, puzzled. "Me," Terran cut him off, taunting. "What, afraid you'll lose to your juniors?" Dianel shook his head and hardened his expression. "No way, I just don't want to waste money on a bet where the outcome is already obvious." Terran, satisfied, tossed over a silver coin, showing largesse. "Then I'll cover the wager for you." He stepped in front of Demian, his frame twice the boy's size, and said, "New recruit, if you complete the exercises better than the seniors, I'll approve the free time you asked for." During training, Terran turned to the ringleaders and warned, "But any of you who lose will be sent to an intensified hell training course, so go all out." They heard this and their faces darkened with anger. "That arrogant kid, teach him manners. Train like your life depends on it, son." Demian bowed respectfully but felt exhilarated inside. Everything's going according to plan. I can't pass up that bit of free time. He watched everyone warming up and thought, even if it takes this, I must change the unit's listless atmosphere. When people give up because they don't know when they'll die, living day to day without hope will eventually eat away not only at you but those around you. Terran folded his arms and looked down, speaking sternly. "All right, let's begin the physical training." He turned and pointed to the large pile of logs beside him, beginning to instruct. "Today's exercise is to run while carrying these logs straight up to the peak of that rocky mountain." Everyone protested indignantly upon hearing it. "Captain, we don't usually do this damned exercise. It's fine for the new recruits, but why do we have to suffer too?" A vein bulging, Terran barked in anger, silencing them at once. "Order, lift them now, stop whining and move." They quickly hauled the logs up the mountain, each of them exhausted. Varen's group struggled as well, sweating profusely. He looked up at Terran standing on the cliff watching them and complained, "Why on earth did the captain come up with this exercise?" They groaned and grumbled angrily as they climbed. "It's obviously because of those new recruits. It's their first time doing this, of course they'll collapse in no time." Varen heard that and turned to look for Demian. "What's that? Where's that new kid?" His face filled with fear and astonishment as he whipped his head upward. "Impossible." Demian had by now put a significant distance between himself and them. When did he crawl all the way up there? He himself was also out of breath, panting with every inhale. He raised his hand to look at the ring and thought to himself, "I didn't expect it also reduces the weight of what I'm carrying." Demian smiled in satisfaction and remarked, "Choosing this ring was the right decision." He looked down toward the foot of the mountain to spot where the others were. Demian saw the lead group still some distance below and thought they'd be hard-pressed to catch up. The only one trying to keep up was. Demian stared at the figure straining to pursue him, surely only Dianel. He was carrying his log while letting out long, exhausted breaths. Dianel's gaze fixed upward, sweat pouring down. He's almost there. Looking at Demian's cheerful, expectant face, he thought to himself, I assumed he was only at top of the training class level, but this is. After a little while longer, the first foot stepped onto the mountain peak. Demian planted the log on the ground with complete confidence. First place, total dominance. Terran, waiting above, was also quite surprised inwardly. He really did finish first. He watched the second man arrive and remarked, "I didn't expect even Dianel to taste defeat. Looks like we've found someone more impressive than I thought." After waiting a while, several people reached the summit. Terran turned to those still struggling below and shouted, "Training is over." His face darkened and his voice made the group shiver. As agreed, the losers will receive the hell exercise. All of you who arrive after the new recruits, drop down now. Suddenly Varen rushed over with a panicked expression, calling out and making Terran curious. "Captain," he looked alarmed and fearful as he gasped, "look toward the company building." Terran followed HIS Chinese letter and widened his eyes in horror. A red flag was fluttering over the distant barracks and the group panicked. Is that the one-star emergency red flag alarm? The grand, ancient city gate loomed under the pale golden sunlight. Terran hurried inside and asked, "Why was the red flag raised?" A subordinate reported, "Someone has died in the Bronzerian forest." He gripped the armrest and sat down slowly. "What are the victim details and the exact location?" The subordinate continued, "They were herb gatherers. That area is restricted." Terran gritted his teeth and swore, "Damn it, it's a forbidden area. Why did they barge in?" He clenched his hand on the table and continued, "Have we confirmed the extent of the damage and any monster reports?" The subordinate recounted tensely, "Both of those are still unclear, sir, but those herb gatherers were accompanied by 6 mercenaries." Before he finished, a voice cut in, "Still no information about the monsters by now?" Terran looked over and asked, "Aaron, how many troops can we mobilize right now?" After a quick calculation, Aaron answered, "About 70, excluding the wounded, sir." Without hesitation, he made a firm decision: exclude the minor casualties, assemble 50 men, and move fast. Aaron bowed and replied respectfully, "Understood." Terran's brows knitted tightly. He thought anxiously, "This looks serious. Deployments are getting more frequent. Is that forest changing?" After those summoned had all arrived, Terran stepped up to them. "Is everyone assembled?" They answered in unison, "Yes, sir." He gave the order immediately, "All arms." Just then Demian approached, panting, and proposed, "We want to come along too." Terran turned sharply and refused, "No matter how good your training performance is, the battlefield is different. You two stay at the barracks." With a serious, determined face, Demian held his ground. "We'll only follow as pack carriers in the rear. You saw our strength and endurance during the fitness check." Kyle beside him added, "We'll do well." He didn't answer immediately but lowered his eyes to think, "How embarrassing, now we have to borrow strength from the new recruits." After a moment, Terran turned and relented. "All right, as long as you don't take part in the fighting, carry spare gear and wait in the rear." "Dianel, hand those spare packs to them," he shouted to acknowledge the order. "Understood." Given permission, Demian glanced at Dianel beside him. "Bronzerian forest, if I remember right, wasn't Dianel?" He said without expression, "There's a demon in the Bronzerian forest." Demian planted his staff on the ground and wiped sweat from his face, incredulous. "A demon? That's ridiculous." Dianel began to panic. "It's not a normal monster. If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, you wouldn't believe it either. An orc possessed by a demon smashed a steel wolf to death outright. Normally, it would take 5 orcs to barely handle one. Because of it, we were forced to abandon that land. If not for that abomination, the Neokali's unit wouldn't have been disbanded." Demian frowned and rubbed his head. "Damn it, the information is all scrambled, can't make sense of it. All the more reason I should go check it out myself, even if it means doing menial tasks." After preparations, Terran shouted from above, "Is everyone ready with their gear?" They all replied together, "Yes, sir." He began to instruct, "I'll say it again, once you enter combat, account for every possible situation. If something seems dangerous, best avoid it. The top priority for everyone is to return alive." "Understood," they shouted back. "Understood, Captain." With preparations complete, Terran decided, "Let's depart." Following behind the group, he thought to himself, "At last, our first real battle." After moving for a while, they entered the forest. He walked and assigned tasks. "We'll sweep the surrounding area first, split into teams of 3, and never leave each other out of sight." Taryn glanced at Demian and Kyle and warned, "You two follow me, don't fall behind." Demian replied, "Yes, sir." Kyle nodded, "I know." Meanwhile, Demian scanned the surroundings, assessing, "So this is where the restricted area begins. There's nothing particularly special about this part of the forest. How on earth?" His eyebrows twitched as if he'd noticed something, yet it reeks of killing intent like a battlefield, doesn't it? Having spent 5 years living on the edge between life and death in battle, the moment he stepped in, his instincts screamed warnings. Demian tightened his grip on his weapon and told himself, "This place is extremely dangerous." Just as the thought passed, a sudden sound rang out, drawing everyone's attention. Taryn quickly turned toward the source of the noise. "Found something." Victor shouted the report, "Captain, over here." When they ran up, the scene before them was drenched in a horrific red. Aaron stood by cautiously, offering an observation. "The scouts checked this area, so why are the weapons left exactly as they were?" Taryn sat down to study it closely. "It shows how terrified they must have been." Then he looked toward a corner. What kind of monster could have caused such a horrifying scene? Aaron rested his sword on his shoulder and guessed, "Captain, could it be some kind of bear-type monster?" Taryn countered immediately, "There are no mutated bears in this forest capable of doing this." Aaron, anxious, continued, "Then could it be orcs?" But his words were cut off by a voice, "I don't think so." Aaron turned in puzzlement toward where Demian stood. Examining what lay at his feet more closely, he suddenly exclaimed, "Isn't that the carcass of a red bear?" Demian confirmed, "As the deputy captain said, the culprit is not a bear-type creature." He pointed to a distant tree. "Judging from those scratch marks, its front paw must be enormous. Only that would explain the wounds on that corpse." Taryn put his hand to his chin, analyzing. "Correct, that's a well-founded argument." He asked with curiosity, "Where did you learn these things?" He replied seriously, "My father used to be a hunter. I'm not an expert, but I overheard a lot." Taryn nodded, "I see, useful knowledge." Kyle, standing behind and hearing the whole exchange, looked a bit puzzled. "Demian, didn't you say your father was a soldier?" Before he could finish questioning, Demian gave him an icy look that warned him silent. Time passed and Taryn made a decision. "That's enough for today. Withdraw, gather the bodies carefully. We must return them to their families." Watching the men working together to clean up, Demian agreed, "If we pushed deeper now, it'd be like walking into a trap. We've only got a few clues. The opponent's whereabouts remain unknown." He smiled faintly and sighed in relief. "Though he seems cold, he's an excellent commander. No wonder Dianel respected such a great man." Taryn continued standing to one side, urging the men seriously, "Retreat, hurry up." At that moment, Demian suddenly noticed something amiss. He shouted to the group, "Everyone, get out of the way." No sooner had he spoken than a huge boulder from nowhere fell straight down with a thunderous crash. Many of the soldiers who couldn't avoid it were crushed. Chaos erupted. "My leg!" Someone went pale and gasped, "Where did that huge rock come from?" Demian quickly turned back and shouted, "Kyle." He accelerated, ran over, and used his strength to lift the rock off his comrades. Demian hurried up to help, gritted his teeth, and shoved the boulder away. After a struggle, it was finally lifted. Seeing that, Taryn seized the moment. He pulled people out one by one. "Quick, everyone give a hand, rescue our comrades now." Those crushed trembled as others dragged them free. Taryn crouched down and surveyed. "They're done for, the condition is bad." Demian rummaged through his pack. "Chew on this, brother." He produced a herb and instructed seriously, "Chew it thoroughly to swallow the juice. This will ease the pain somewhat." Taryn startled and reached out to stop Demian. "Sleepweed reduces pain, but it's poisonous. Swallowing it raw before detoxifying is." Demian explained without changing his expression. "If taken with the seeds of this spiny fruit, it can neutralize the toxin. While they're still conscious, chew as much as you can." In the end, Taryn didn't intervene. He fell into thought, how does this kid know so much? After giving his comrades the pain relief, Demian suggested, "Captain, we must withdraw immediately. That rock didn't fall by itself. The culprit is clearly nearby." No sooner had he finished than the sight before them froze both Demian and Taryn, a monster. Seeing the giant bear before him, he couldn't help blurting out, "Unbelievable, what the hell is that?" Someone exclaimed, "In all my life I've never seen such a massive monster." Varen beside him trembled and asked, "How could a black bear turn into something like that?" Wasting no time, Terran roared an order, "Everyone prepare to fight." On command, everyone present quickly pointed their swords forward. The bear monster roared and charged at them, beginning its attack. Under the onslaught of its razor claws, someone shouted a warning, "Dodge." Terran focused intensely and urged, "Get the wounded to the rear and form a perimeter, aim for its legs first." Meanwhile, Helson raised his axe to strike the beast's leg. A comrade shouted, "Helson," he reassured them, "leave it to me." He delivered. Helson drew back and swung his sharp axe powerfully down. A fierce slash struck straight into the bear's leg. However, on closer look, the blow didn't affect it at all. He thought to himself that the strike would usually split an orc's thigh. Seeing Helson stunned and unresponsive, Terran rushed up from behind and urged, "Helson, focus." At that moment, the beast raised a massive paw. Then it slammed down hard onto his body. With tremendous force, both the axe and Helson's body were flung a distance. He crashed to the ground, gasping, watching the enraged beast before him. It stepped closer and once more raised its razor-sharp claws. The beast struck down with full force, shattering the ground into pieces. Watching it all unfold, Terran ground his teeth and cursed, "You damn monster." He glanced to one side and thought silently, "3 comrades are down, today I will surely take this beast's life." Terran steadied himself, stared at the beast, and ordered, "Attack, move." All the sharp spear points were aimed straight at it. He bellowed again, "Damn it, stab until you pierce it." Seeing Demian's group trying to advance, one man stepped in front of the 2 of them and blocked them. "New recruits, fall back to the rear now." Seizing the opportunity, Terran called back loudly, "Dianel," he winded his sword from afar, "Captain." A powerful slash fell, severing the beast's legs in an instant. It opened its mouth in agony and roared madly. After losing a leg, it couldn't stay upright and collapsed right before Terran. He planted his sword tip forward against its brow furrowed, declaring, "It's over." The wild beast sensed the emanating energy. Demian froze slightly, "Mana." On the other side, Terran leapt up with his sword, "Die." A finishing slash sliced through the beast's body in an instant. After it was done, one man stomped on its body, grinning with excitement. "Told you, overwhelm them with force and you win." Another added, "Serves you right, you filthy beast." Terran reached toward the beast, surveying it, wondering where this damn creature came from. Furthermore, he spread apart its thick fur and discovered something unusual, these spots. Helson asked anxiously, "Could it be contagious? People with infectious diseases often get spots like these." Demian, standing off to one side witnessing this, widened his eyes. "Those spots are real." He stepped slowly toward the corpse. For something so aberrant to appear here, there's only one possible explanation. We must immediately investigate where this monstrosity originated. Terran wasted no time and quickly assigned tasks. Aaron, take the men and secure the perimeter. Varen, skin this and bring it back for armor. Demian cut in, "It seems this pelt is unusable." Aaron asked in confusion, Why is that?" Terran was slightly startled. He pressed his lips and stared intently at Demian. Terran read his face and concluded that the boy knew something. He decided once more, "Leave the pelt, withdraw the entire unit. Also, you new recruit. Come with me immediately." Back at headquarters, Terran called Demian into a private room. "Sit." He nodded slightly, "Understood." With a serious face, Terran looked at Demian and asked, "Do you know anything about the black-spotted monster we found in the forest?" He was silent for a moment, then decided to voice his thought. "I think it's very likely been infected with Makai." Terran blurted in surprise, "Makai, that evil energy the dark mages use?" Demian confirmed, "Yes." Terran, tense with concern, asked, "So there's a dark mage hiding in the forest? You know dark magic is strictly forbidden, right?" He lowered his eyes and shook his head. "We can't be certain yet. It could be a dark mage or it could be an evil relic accumulating Makai there." Makai, the power derived from the worship and rituals of demons. Whoever is consumed by this Makai will ultimately meet a tragic death. Demian frowned slightly, thinking, Bronzerian forest is known to contain mana-stained stones, but didn't they only start to activate in this era? The existence of that mana stone only became known to the world after a catastrophe shook the entire empire in a later age. The Neokali's unit discovered a demon-possessed monster in the Bronzerian forest. The Imperial Army formed an extermination force to enter Bronzerian forest and eliminate the monsters. A possibility suddenly occurred to him. What if? He startled and widened his eyes. Everything is only just beginning at this moment. The longer Makai is left, the more it assimilates and mutates creatures, making them stronger. So if we act before the Makai's power spreads, we might be able to destroy it. Terran sighed heavily. How do you know so much about this? He answered honestly. Sir, I heard it from my father. He encountered a similar case before. Terran seriously requested, I want to hear more details about that. After saying that, Terran fell into thought, for their situation felt like a drowning man clutching at a straw. Demian nodded without hesitation. Yes, Captain, my father told me that. Over here, a groan suddenly rang out. Oh man, I'm aching all over. A man held his head, dejected. Yesterday's mission drained me completely. On the bed, Demian picked up a pillow and reminded, Kyle, wake up, General. He grimaced and complained. All right, all right. At that moment, Varen burst through the door to announce, big news, you guys. He'd heard that Bronzerian forest has been sealed off. Starting today, not only the herb gatherers but even we are barred from entry. So we won't have to go on missions for a while, we'll just stay home and train. One man clasped his hands excitedly. Perfect, it's like a gift from the sky. The other soldiers nodded in agreement. Anyway, many of us are injured, this is the perfect chance to rest. Kyle saw Demian sigh and asked, Demian, why the long face, aren't you happy? He replied sadly, oh, it's nothing, rest is good after all. After answering, Demian raised his hands to cover his face, thinking, given the unit's condition, this is the golden time to recover, but why must it happen now? Suddenly, a series of footsteps in the corridor caught Kyle's attention. A guy poked his head out to gossip. Who are those fellows? Why did the home guard bring a corpse here? Why did those lazy old men suddenly come over? Over here, Gavin sat expressionless with his arms folded in the center of the room. Across from him, Terran asked warily, what brings you here? He replied seriously, thanks to your timely report, the ecclesiastical office agreed to step in. They said they truly sensed a foul, evil aura from that monster corpse. Terran pressed his lips, reflecting, so everything that Kid Demian said was accurate. Could Bronzerian forest really be tainted by Makai? Gavin shook his head, but nothing is certain yet. That's why they've sent clergy to coordinate with us on the purge. His proposal cast a shadow over Terran. This situation is unfamiliar, so I want to bring a soldier who understands Makai with us. Terran offered a reason to refuse. That lad is a newcomer who just arrived. Sending someone with no battle experience would be, before he finished, Gavin cut in, but after all, wasn't he the one who first spotted the problem? Hearing that, Terran hesitated. That matter, he worried inwardly. If I refuse, he'll surely find an excuse to make trouble for the unit later. In the end, Terran made a decision. He glanced and called, Aaron. The man responded immediately, here. Meanwhile, as Demian sat morose, a voice called out, bring that Demian here. The scene opened before the sturdy walls of a towering military fortress, where the kingdom's glorious aura still lingered in the solemn atmosphere. The view quickly shifted inside as Demian, a young red-haired recruit, strolled into the Grand Command Center. His ordinary kit, without a single piece of armor, immediately drew bewildered stares from the fully armed guards on duty. Approaching the massive wooden table, Demian stood opposite Terran. The veteran officer began outlining a new, difficult mission with a grave expression, stressing that the new recruit was free to refuse this dangerous call. But without a second's hesitation, Demian volunteered fiercely. Beneath that eager exterior, a sharp, calculating gleam flashed in his eyes. He fully understood that joining this risky sortie was the absolute best chance to track down a specific monster infected by malignant Makai. Completely stunned by the boy's disturbingly zealous and fearless attitude, the stubborn commander was forced to relent. Agree to set an official schedule and allow him to withdraw. The scene cut to the dusty courtyard just outside the colossal fortress gates. Still uneasy about the boy's reckless confidence, the obstinate commander pressed him one last time, earnestly proposing an escort of seasoned veterans for the journey. Accompanied by an arrogant, chillingly calm smile, Demian flatly refused the assistance. Inwardly, he coldly calculated that bringing along sluggish old hands would ruin his chance for a lightning-fast escape should the mission suddenly go to hell. With a weary sigh, the commander's expression darkened as he issued a strict, stern order. Under no circumstances was the new recruit to take part in actual combat. Feigning complete innocence, Demian casually brushed off that grave warning. He mischievously promised he'd only gather a few mana-restoring herbs for the unit and return intact. Then, confident, he strode straight toward the perilous wilds. Left behind in the dust, the commander was dumbfounded and his subordinates gaped after the receding figure, whispering in utter bewilderment at the emergence of this unpredictable, insane variable. The scene immediately shifted to the mist-shrouded edge of Bronzerian forest. A large battalion, fully equipped, was advancing deep into the treacherous woods. An impressively assembled unit had been specially formed to hunt a banned dark mage. Leading the vanguard was Captain Vasil of the Urkel Guard, stern and composed. Alongside him was the mysterious cleric Claire from the Adelant Temple. The silent, tense march was abruptly interrupted when Captain Vasil caught sight of the red-haired recruit Demian, attempting to put on an air of swagger. The veteran captain aggressively confronted the boy, expecting immediate obedience. But Demian coldly cut him off. With a half-smirk of sarcasm, the young soldier completely disregarded the senior's authority. He heartlessly declared that because they belonged to two entirely different military units, the captain's rank held no weight. Hearing that, Vasil challenged him, "But I'm an officer." Demian paid little heed and replied, "Don't be so rigid, I'll cooperate fully, so don't worry." Vasil ground his teeth in anger and spat that the name was insane. Witnessing the odd, disrespectful exchange, Claire's attention was immediately drawn to this fearless recruit. She asked Vasil about him. As the captain, boiling with anger, revealed that this boy was the first to raise the alarm about Makai in the area. Claire's radiant yellow eyes narrowed, staring at him with intense scrutiny. Swiftly moving up to the young soldier, the holy cleric nearly cornered him. Stepping closer to Demian, Claire asked, "Are you sensing something?" Hearing someone speak to him, Demian turned and asked her, "You're a cleric, right?" Claire pressed on, "I heard you were the first to suspect Makai. May I ask you a few questions?" Demian, having nothing to hide, replied, "Of course." Demian's eyes narrowed slightly as she asked bluntly, "How did you know it was Makai?" Noticing the scrutinizing look from the other, Demian became guarded, unsure whether she suspected him. After arranging his words, Demian answered calmly, "I heard it from my late father. He'd encountered something similar." Hearing that, Claire was slightly surprised and asked, "Could you tell it in more detail?" Demian asked Claire if she had examined the corpse. Quickly she confirmed she had, along with the high priest. Demian's expression turned serious as he spoke. "I know most of the monsters in Bronzerian Forest, but that one was the first I'd ever seen in my life. It had no reason left and had black spots on its skin, so I think it was struck by Makai." Claire asked skeptically, "Did you learn this from your father?" Demian nodded in confirmation. Claire greeted him and departed after receiving his answer. She then approached Vasil and said, "Perhaps we should press deeper." Hearing that, Vasil rallied the troops. "Everyone advance deeper. Report immediately if you see anything suspicious." The heavy footsteps of the marching force echoed throughout the forest. Demian quietly fell back to the edge of the formation. He calculated that the regular soldiers could handle basic reconnaissance. But he knew he needed to go deeper to intercept his real target. Suddenly, a guard spotted Demian crouched in the dense underbrush and panicked. He shouted to the others that there might be a monster lurking. Weapons were drawn at once. But the panic quickly turned to annoyance when they realized Demian was happily digging up a rare mana-restoring root. Feeling utterly foolish, the guards, red-faced, angrily barked at the new recruit, asking if he thought he was on a picnic in the woods. Demian's innocent look vanished instantly. He threw a cold, deadly glance at the guard who'd shouted, warning him chillingly that speaking recklessly like that would lead to an early grave. He calmly reminded the angry soldiers that searching was their job, not his. What was wrong with his action just now? The guard shouted back, because of you the whole squad was startled. Don't take actions that hinder the search. Demian mercilessly mocked their cowardly reaction. He pointed out that if the rustle of a bush was enough to make them tremble, their pathetic competence was tarnishing the reputation of the entire guard force. Before the angry guard could retort, Captain Vasil stepped straight into the dispute to quell it. He sternly scolded Demian for his reckless behavior, warning the boy not to do anything else that could jeopardize the search operation. Playing the part of a cooperative recruit, Demian gently agreed to remain in the assigned area. With a tired, exasperated sigh, the captain turned his back on the shaking new recruit. He ordered his men to lighten their heavy gear to begin a thorough sweep of the land. The silent search was abruptly torn apart as the dense bushes shook violently. A swarm of terrifying, glowing red eyes pierced the dark canopy, and frantic battle cries rang through the unit as a horde of massive creatures poured out from the forest edge. At first glance, the seasoned soldiers smugly shrugged off the ambush. Seeing only a pack of ordinary wild orco, they confidently drew their weapons, expecting a quick, easy slaughter. But their arrogant smiles were instantly snuffed out upon closer inspection. One soldier froze in utter horror when he noticed diseased black spots and fire-red eyes covering the creatures' bodies. A horrifying truth descended. These were not ordinary monsters, but savage orco utterly mutated by malignant Makai. With a thunderous roar, a massive, corrupted beast charged straight at the front line. Moving at an unnatural speed, it closed the distance before anyone could react. A heavy blade swung down toward the frozen guard. Others screamed for him to fall back, but it was too late. The terrified guard was completely frozen, resigned to a brutal death as he realized the strike was simply too fast to dodge, yet the killing blow never reached its mark. A piercing clash of metal echoed through the forest as the heavy strike was perfectly deflected. A loud shout rang out, bringing everyone to their senses. There stood Demian. With a burst of radiant mana flaring around him, the recruit coldly asked the trembling veteran how much longer he intended to soil the proud reputation of their unit. On the other side, Captain Vasil immediately yelled to warn everyone, all troops form up quickly. Split into groups of 3 to hold the orcs. Phil, Euros, Terran, you 3 protect the cleric. The 3 of them agreed at once. And while Captain Vasil was still issuing orders, Demian silently calculated from the rear. That calm bearing meant he must be an extremely seasoned warrior. Thus both sides began to clash. At that moment, a sudden shout drew the protagonist's attention. He turned and saw that Claire's group was in danger. Studying the creature's blood-red, savage eyes, Demian guessed, it seems these monsters are going crazier. Could the cleric's energy be the greatest threat to them? A shield-bearer, struggling to fend off an orc's attack, shouted to signal Claire. Claire understood and clasped her hands to pray. A dazzling golden light erupted from her body. At a glance, Demian recognized that light as the distinctive energy of clerics, holy power. Sure enough, as the light spread outward, the orcs recoiled in fear and dared not advance. Seizing the opportunity, the soldiers began to counterattack and push them back. On another front, Demian realized, now is the time to act. If this continues, no one will survive to leave here. The captain had strictly forbidden interference, but he could not stand by. Thinking that, he gathered power into his legs and launched himself forward. He leapt up behind the orcs, and while they were distracted, Demian quickly drove his blade through the throats of the creatures, sending their massive bodies collapsing forward. A soldier seeing this cried out in surprise, "Why are you here?" Demian had no time to explain and shouted, "Go help the others, hurry." The soldier grit his teeth and turned toward Claire, muttering, "But what about the cleric?" Demian yelled again, "Leave her to me, move." At that point, the other 2 no longer hesitated and nodded, understood. They then sprinted off to reinforce the others. On this side, Demian turned and asked, "Are you all right, cleric?" Claire's face was still stunned, seemingly unable to shake off the dizziness. Demian couldn't stand it. He gripped her face and shouted, "Snap out of it. Do you want to see everyone lying dead here?" Claire gritted her teeth and shook her head, "No." Demian immediately understood her condition. "This is your first battle, isn't it? That burst of holy power earlier was probably instinctive. Release your full holy power in that direction like you did before. Now." "I understand," Claire shouted. She then dropped to her knees and began uttering prayers too. "The great pontiff above, your children are in grave peril. Please have mercy and bless us." When the prayer ended, an even brighter light burst forth from her than before, many times more intense. This surprised Demian. "What is this? Who is this girl? I thought she was an ordinary cleric. Who knew she could wield holy power as strong as a high cleric?" The moment the sacred light touched them, the orcs hurriedly shielded their faces as if being burned. The soldiers saw their chance and shouted, "Now's our chance, kill those beasts." No sooner had they spoken than the whole group surged forward to attack at once. And the orcs affected by the holy power, unable to move, were easily cut down in a few beats. Before long, all the surrounding monsters had been wiped out by them. "Is it over?" someone whispered. Elsewhere, Captain Vasil also breathed a heavy sigh of relief and ordered, "Quickly tally the casualties. Is anyone so badly wounded they can't move on their own?" A soldier stepped forward to report, "We've lost 8 fighters." Hearing that, the captain quietly said, "Collect and preserve their bodies carefully. We'll all return home together." Then he turned to Claire and asked, "Cleric, should we continue pushing deeper? We still haven't found traces of Makai." In response, Claire refused, "No, that's no longer necessary. They're certainly infected with Makai. This land appears to be thoroughly tainted by evil energy. There may be a far more terrible incident deeper within. Once the official report is completed, we must immediately form an expeditionary strike team." Hearing her words, a smile tugged at Demian's lips. "So the purge team is finally about to be formed. It's likely a large extermination force involving many clerics will be organized, and the Neo-Caliph's squad will serve as the vanguard." At the same time, a young man stepped toward Demian and said with an embarrassed look, "Ah, by the way, thank you for saving my life." The other two bowed their heads and said, "If you hadn't come in time, I wouldn't have kept my life. I'm very grateful for your help." Hearing them, Demian scratched his head awkwardly. "It's nothing, no big deal." Then he let out a heavy sigh. "I spent so much effort gathering these to give to the Neo-Caliph's unit." He took some herbs out from inside his cloth pouch, and then hurried over toward Vasil. "Hey, could you vouch for these healers and medicines in Urkel for me?" Vasil turned to him, eyes flashing with anger. "What?" Demian held out his pouch of herbs as proof. "Do you know how absurdly they mark up herbal prices in Urkel? They sell them for 5 times the market price in other cities. All the wages I earned with blood and sweat went to buying medicine. Use these herbs to treat the wounded soldiers," he said as he shoved the pouch into Vasil's hands, leaving the captain a bit surprised. But Vasil quickly nodded, "Thank you very much." Then he shouted to the remaining troops, "All units, withdraw, take our comrades' bodies and care for the wounded." Meanwhile, Claire watched Demian's departing figure and gave a faint smile.